Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto becomes a sage in Inuyasha. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Yunes and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Sesshomaru, heir apparent to the lordship of the West, was nearing the climax of his second century and couldn't be any more happy. Sure, he wasn't the most popular young yokai on earth, but what did that really matter when his father promised to take him on his first hunt outside the Palace of the West? He was positively giddy with anticipation. Only his Nobel upbringing prevented him from running around his room to shake off his excess of energy. He wanted to make his father proud. That had only ever been his aim in life. Thus, when the doors to his rooms opened and revealed Hatsuo, his minder, his face fell. Anticipating this reaction, the lesser Inuyakai preemptively held up his hands. "It isn't what you think, little lord." Face cleared of emotions, the young Daikai raised one perfectly formed brow. Then this Sesshomaru's father isn't too preoccupied to spend time with his only child, again? He asked flatly. Well. Yes. But he has a very good reason, Hatsuo hurriedly replied. Sesshomaru, used to the frequent excuses of his progenitor, stayed silent. He didn't even ask, yet his minder explained further. The Inu no Taisho has to attend a meeting with the dragon ambassador. He just showed up half an hour ago. But don't worry. We won't have to delay your first hunt. After all, it is a very important rite of passage. I will simply accompany you in your father's stead. The young heir simply nodded, straightened his posture and calmly walked past the other yokai, an empty feeling in his stomach. He didn't even know why he still cared, why it still hurt. His father hadn't really spent time with him in over 100 years. In fact, he couldn't even remember the last time the two of them had spoken privately, outside of the courtier's earshot. One would think he was used to it by now. He simply wasn't worth the time of the great dog general. His jaw clenched. On his way to the palace gates he could hear the lesser yokai talking. They were always talking. And always about him. He could clearly hear their whispers. Once upon a time he thought them plainly disrespectful, but he had slowly learned that they simply didn't believe his hearing that good. He was exceptional when they thought him an unfeeling, unaware statue. Apparently, according to the court gossip, he was unapproachable, unnaturally apathetic and downright fearsome. He put them on edge. Whenever he met someone's gaze with his blazing eyes, they hurriedly averted their own and unconsciously backed away from him. Once it had hurt him. He hadn't understood. Now he was used to it. He still didn't understand, but he no longer cared. He would show them all what he was capable of. He had 3 days until his 150th birthday. On that day he was supposed to pay tribute to his lord by offering him his hunting trophy. He would make everyone see that he was a strong Daikai worthy of their praise and a place amongst them. Serenely wandering the surrounding woods, he ignored the presence of his minder, who was only there to watch and witness, not interfere under any circumstances. Never once was he heard. The heir to the West never had any problems to stay silent, and prey was easily found. He deftly cached a pair of rabbits with his poisonous claws, but wasn't remotely satisfied. For his rite of passage he needed something more impressive, something awe-inspiring. He had 3 whole days to accomplish it after all. More than enough time to hunt something really worth his right. See that it couldn't be any other way. On the 3rd day he was on his way back to the palace carrying the carcass of a most impressive black bear, his chest swelling with pride. As elated as he was to bring home such a beautiful yet relatively dangerous trophy, he didn't smell his attacker until a sword embedded itself into his back. Crying as the full amount of pain accompanying such a grievous wound hit him, he instinctively turned around and struck out with poisonous claws. Sheer dumb luck and his attacker's surprise were his saving grace. He couldn't have aimed any better if he forced his vision to clear. The pain was too all-encompassing, like nothing he had ever felt before. Sesshomaru-sama. The annoying voice of his minder ripped him back into reality. In an epic show of will he gritted his teeth and focused. The assailant lay dead to his feet. A panther yokai, he absently noticed. He had killed him with a poisonous strike directly at the jugular. His attacker never had a chance. And it was pure dumb luck and instinct that had saved him. He looked into dead flat eyes. He had killed someone. He heaved up every last bit of meat he had eaten this hunt. Finally he noticed the steadying hand on his shoulder and reared back. Indoctrinated pride made him straighten himself to reclaim a semblance of dignity. He used all his reclaimed resolve to coldly command. Stay away. You are only to watch the Sesshomaru's first hunt right, not interfere. But young lord, this was. Sesshomaru cut him off aggressively with a deep growl that intensified the pain in his lower back. Aware that pulling the sword out would only make him bleed out, he apathetically repositioned the bear and added the assailant's remains to his burden. Suppressing a grunt, he slowly but surely made his way back to the palace. He must have looked even more frightening than before because everyone skittered hastily out of his was as soon as he reached his home. Hatsuo warily and worriedly followed him silently like a shadow as they made their way to the great audience hall, in which all relevant lords and ladies had already gathered to witness their lord's heir's first rite of passage. Solemn silence engulfed the hall as Sessumero let the two corpses slid onto the marbled floor. He raised his gaze and regarded heavily breathing the empty throne, a droplet of sweat running along his temple. After a few moments of silence Utashi, his father's second in command, stepped up next to the throne and declared in a low baritone voice. His lordship is unable to attend. Sessumero snarled, half in pain, half in frustrated anger. Then he collected himself. It didn't matter. This wasn't for his father. This was his rite of passage and damn anyone who would presume otherwise. Thus he barked loudly to the collected nobility to catch their attention and spread his arms wide. This Sessumero, heir to the west, presents himself. This pack is proud. This pack is strong. Today this Sessumero adds to this strength. Today this pack gains a new hunter. All around him his people overcame their shock and barked in agreement and celebration. Not long after he was the eye of a roaring storm of yokai. It felt good to be finally acknowledged for something he did, not who he was or who people assumed he was. This was his moment. And yet the empty throne seemed to mock him. His jaw clenched. He briefly closed his eyes, took a deep breath and calmly strode outside, no longer wanting to stay in that empty feeling place. As soon as he reached the hallway Hatsuo pulled him into a side chamber in which one of the rare palace healers stood in the ready. Not even twitching as the sword was pulled out, he calmly concentrated to keep his breathing steady. Before long he could feel the warmth of healing yoki soothe his back. I couldn't completely heal the wound, Mylord. I advise you to keep the bandages on for at least 3 days to be sure it heals nicely. The young heir never showed any sign he had listened and simply left as soon as the healer took his hands off him. He was tired. But he couldn't know he wouldn't sleep until he knew what was so important as to keep his father away from his own son's first rite of passage. Always having been particularly light on his feet, Sessumero neared his father's chambers unnoticed despite his sluggishness. Oddly enough, there weren't any kind of guards posted on his doors. He frowned and approached more cautiously. When he heard an undeniably female and unfamiliar voice, he halted and skittered into a niche that he usually used to catch a glimpse of his father when he, as usual, overlooked spending time with his son in favor of attending important matters. The Inu no Taisho blinked once, then twice. He sniffed carefully. Then a big smile stretched over his face, reaching from one ear to the other effortlessly. He laughed, picked her up and twirled her around, making her squeak. "That is wonderful." He exclaimed joyously, "A child. Our child. We will love and spoil him rotten." She snorted and swatted his arm. "And what makes you think it will be a boy?" He simply grinned. "Dog intuition." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't even reply as the father of her unborn child started devouring her lips, his claws carelessly ripping apart the last bit of the clinging, blue kimono, and shedding his own. Sessumero watched strangely detached as his father, stark naked, begun to fuck another woman than his mother, fuck the woman who apparently carried his bastard half-brother. He didn't actively register the gasps and moans of their fornication. The sounds simply etched themselves into his mind, the image of his father fucking the woman he loved more than he ever cared for his wife, let alone his son, burning itself into his memory. As they lay spent and in completion entangled with each other and reasserting their love for each other, the young Daiukai calmly turned around and left the royal wing unnoticed. No one questioned him leaving the palace after his first successful hunt. They, for the first time ever, paid genuine deference for him. He had the freedom and respect he always wanted. Yet they seemed insufficient to fill the hollow feeling in his chest. He reached the clearing of his first hunt, his first kill. It still was covered in the stench of blood and vomit. Yet he felt nothing as he regarded the brown-colored grass. Emotional exhaustion freed him of any feeling he could have felt. He simply had nothing more to give. Ever. A blinding white light suddenly appeared in the center of the massacre and forced him to shield his sensitive eyes. Naruto Uzumaki couldn't be any happier. He had successfully returned from his first mission outside the village. That it was subsequently declared an A-ranked mission made his personal victory even sweeter. Not to mention the bridge named in his honor. Acknowledgement. His whole body shook from a sense of triumph. It was an emotion he had only ever felt after receiving his forehead protector and thus graduation from the academy. It was elation. Full of excessive energy he jumped up from his bed and raced outside. He felt so happy he could burst. He simply had to share this with everyone in the village. He stopped by various shops and greeted the owners cheerfully, never really noticing them not responding likewise. Happily crackling he made his rounds all through Konoha streets, never registering any kind of negative stares. Finally stopping to take a breath, he leaned on a wall to greedily inhale air. He savored the moment as best he could, his grin never leaving his face for even a second. Then he heard a familiar voice. But before he could lordly announce himself, he heard what they were talking about and it piqued his interest. I know, apparently the whole village knew, bar our generation and younger. I still can't believe they wouldn't tell us before. Answering Sakura's lovely voice was Ino's harder one. She sniffed derisively. But really, I am hardly surprised. That dead last good-for-nothing freak always seemed off. At least now we know why. He is a monster. Naruto froze as Sakura made a snarking sound. I know. He always rubbed me the wrong way. I still can't believe they would let him stay in our team. My dear Sasuke and I protested loudly. We want that monster with us even less than the day they grouped us. But the Hokage said we couldn't change teams once formed. I seriously don't know how I will even stand his presence next training session. For the first time ever he heard Ino make a sympathetic noise towards her best friend and/or rival. I genuinely feel for you too and Kakashi-sensei. It really must be hard not to let on that you guys know he is the demon that destroyed Konoha and took so many lives. Did you know the most shocking thing about that? Her friend must have shaken her head in denial because Ino explained in a slightly raised voice. I overheard Asuma-sensei talking about that day when the story about the awakening of the demon made its rounds. Apparently he not only ran rampage through the whole village, he also killed his own parents that day. Sakura and Naruto simultaneously took in a sharp breath. Then the former shrieked quietly and whispered vehemently. What? But that is horrible. What kind of monster kills his own parents on the day it is born? Imagine living with that guilt. I guess I couldn't. I'd rather take my life than life with that knowledge. But then, does a demon even feel like you and I do? I mean. The shinobi in training never learned what the love of his life meant. They moved out of earshot. He was too shocked to even contemplate moving. Frozen was what he was, completely and utterly frozen, simply leaning against the wall completely frozen, unwilling to process what he had heard. Even beginning to contemplate it shoved a stake through his heart. It became difficult to breathe, to think, to live. Suddenly he recalled that day by the bridge, his namesake bridge. How utterly empty that sentiment suddenly felt. It couldn't even begin to quell the all-encompassing feeling of rage and power he lived through briefly. He had never felt anything like it before. Subconsciously afraid, he had shoved those thoughts aside and had focused entirely on the success of the mission, completely ignoring the memory of rampaging energy just underneath his fingertips. It had felt so good. It made him sick. This was the power that protected him and took so many lives. The power that soothed him like a blanket and made his life in the village living hell. The power that had kissed him like a lover he had never known and killed his parents. It had felt so good and so utterly wrong. He longed for it with every fiber of his being, with his very soul. He vomited. After emptying his stomach in a not abandoned street without anyone caring except to look at him in disgust, he could finally sympathize with the villagers and their hatred. He truly was a monster, a demon. Not worth even a shred of the love and recognition he had longed for his whole life. Nauseated he swayed and fell to his knees landing in his own vomit. He didn't care. All his life he had been told he was a monster. He ultimately had no choice but to believe it. He was a demon, an abomination that had killed not only a good part of the very village he wanted to protect but his own parents. Imagine living with that guilt. I guess I couldn't. I'd rather take my life than life with that knowledge. Suddenly a peerless calmness engulfed him. He knew exactly what to do. Without hesitation a kunai found its way into his hand. He regarded it soberly. He knew dozens of ways to accomplish this one simple task, but he supposed he should follow a reliable, dead certain path. His mind emptied and his hand serenely found the way to his own neck, never once shaking. Suddenly a blinding light engulfed him and forced his eyes shut. Then he knew no more. As the light subsided, Sesshomaru carefully peeked at the clearing from behind his raised arms. He beheld the most horrendous, but the most fascinating sight he had seen in a very long time. There in blood and vomit laid a young yakai about his age, wearing the most hideous garments the young heir had ever seen. They were screamingly orange. Idly he asked himself whether the stranger thought it a good diversion strategy in combat. It at least had given him pause. So maybe there was some merit to that thought. But that wasn't what kept his sight transfixed in fascination. No, the boy was indubitably a young Daiukai. A kitsune Daiukai if the faint smell was anything to go by. He had rarely seen another Daiukai than Ines because he had previously been too young to be allowed to attend any official meetings with other clans. Diligently studying the stranger he caught sight of the same protruding fangs and claws which he himself had and 3 slender bright orange whisker marks on each cheek. The latter startled him a bit. He had yet to come across a demon that bore even remotely similar markings to himself and his father. Equally intriguing was the unkempt mop of golden yellow hair. It was unlike any hair color he had seen until now. He didn't recall reading about any kitsune clan with these kind of yakai marks. And he had read a lot. The quiet pitiful moan escaped the stranger's lips and his eyelids fluttered. After a moment startlingly blue eyes met molten gold. Both pairs having the same narrow pupils of a predator. Then the stranger cursed crudely and reached for his full-on weapon. Anticipating and bracing for an attack, he reacted instinctively by disarming his opponent. Only to realize that the other boy had not aimed at Sessamaru, but himself. The young heir was aghast. What in the name of the four lords was the stranger thinking? Obviously not much, because following his act of insanity he started crying hard. Never having had to deal with someone about the same age as himself, the Inuyasha wondered if that reaction was normal. But using himself as a criterion for young Daikai behavior, he supposed that it was not. Still, he was out of his depth. Cautiously he crouched down in front of the stranger and sniffed to perceive any other smell than blood and vomit. He recognized disgust and desperation, hurt and a deep feeling of longing. For what, he could not discern, but what he perceived so far had convinced him that the other yokai did not seek him harm. He was merely emotionally distraught. Determining a course of action, because that was what Sessamaru did best, he declared. "This Sessamaru shall keep you." The stranger hiccuped, blinked confusedly and then sought his gaze slowly and uncomprehendingly. "You are obviously lost. So this Sessamaru is keeping you?" A couple of blinks later the stranger still didn't believe his ears and looked around. Really looked. And for the first time he seemed to realize that he was in a completely foreign place. His gaze dropped to the floor, his head hanging and his moving hair revealing the same pointed ears that the heir to the west had. "You wouldn't want me," he whispered sadly. "No one wants me. I am a ADD demon." He shut his eyes and another tear ran over his cheek. I deserve to die," he explained nearly inaudibly. The Inuyasha looked at him incredulously. The fair-haired stranger seemed to have that effect on him repeatedly. Not an easy feat at all. Which made him all the more determined to keep this source of entertainment. "This Sessamaru is a demon, a Daikai, just like you. This Sessamaru does not think we deserve to die." The stranger's head stopped up. Blue eyes met the golden ones in shock. Seeing that he wouldn't be forming coherent sentences anytime soon, Sessamaru explained. "This Sessamaru makes you part of his pack. Come, you are hardly presentable." Just as he turned to leave he caught sight of the kitsune's face. A most brilliant smile had positively usurped it. He let go of a light, happy chuckle, scratched his neck in obvious embarrassment and exclaimed full of renewed energy. "Alright, Dadabeo." Naruto felt like he was dreaming. He had woken up to a massive headache and the fact that he was still alive. Everything felt a little strange and overwhelming. But he ignored it in favor of finally righting the world of his mistaken existence. When the kunai was ripped from his hand he couldn't release the building pressure in his chest by any other way. He started to cry without realizing. Too caught up in the feeling of failure and self-disgust, taking up another weapon didn't even cross his mind. The stranger's words only sluggishly entered his consciousness. He needed a couple of rapid heartbeats to understand their meaning. At first he was too preoccupied by the fact that a villager was talking kindly to him. Then he blinked slowly and took in his surroundings. This wasn't Konoha anymore. In fact, he had never seen this place before, let alone that silver-haired stranger. With a feeling of dread he hung his head. If the stranger knew the truth, he wouldn't be so kind. Yet Naruto felt obliged to inform him, lest he came to harm like so many before. He was dangerous, and the incident by the bridge had made it obvious he had no control over himself. "This Sessamaru is a demon, a Daikai, just like you. This Sessamaru does not think we deserve to die." Shock. Complete and utter shock was the only thing he could feel at that moment. There was someone else like him. And he thought him deserving to live despite their nature. But then, surely the stranger hadn't killed a huge amount of villagers including his own parents. Or didn't demons care? Maybe he was an anomaly. Still. The demon had invited him into his pack. Naruto knew what that meant. He had heard the Inuyasha clan talk like that. It meant family. Plain and simple. For a moment he was on the edge of tears again, but then he felt a huge smile widening in his face. Never ever had anyone wanted him as family. Not even when they didn't know what he was. But this strange boy knew and he still wanted him. Suddenly he didn't care anymore that he was a demon and felt embarrassed about his earlier outburst. If being a demon meant that he was going to have a family, then maybe it wasn't so bad after all. He ignored the silent whisper in his head that tried to remind him of all the deaths he had caused and exclaimed in his usual cheerful manner. "Alright, Dadabeo." He followed the other boy. Was his name Sessamaru? With a slight spring in his step. He felt a little overwhelmed. And not only emotionally. Now that he wasn't retreating into himself anymore, he noticed just how different this place was. Everything smelled so much more, everything was brighter. His skin prickled with each tiniest amount of wind. The whole world seemed somehow more intense. His thought stopped abruptly when his gaze caught the hugest and most impressive building he had ever seen. It was a magnificent and beautiful palace, fortified with massive stone walls and heavily guarded. Suddenly he was nervous. This was obviously the other boy's home. And he was obviously loaded. The guards didn't even question him for bringing in a stranger. So he really must be well known. He felt a little inadequate with his dirty, ratty old jumpsuit. But then, it was the only piece of clothing he could afford, first with his meager orphan charity and then with the lousy pay of D-ranked missions. Eating as much ramen as he didn't help either. He had hoped to buy new ones with the increased income of doing higher-ranked missions, but he shook his head and focused on his surroundings yet again. He saw people eyeing him interestedly, but not disgustedly. That was a first for him. And it felt good. And why wouldn't they? All of them seemed a little strange, stranger than usual that is. Sessamaru had said it was a pack. That probably meant other demons. Maybe all of them were demons. He was no longer alone. A grin sneaked onto his lips. But the people in the palace stared even more at the silver-haired boy and bowed deeply in respect when he passed them. Sessamaru didn't even seem to notice. He confidently strode towards his chambers. A minder, who had obviously been waiting for him despairingly, jumped up as he noticed him. Sessamaru-sama. I am so glad that you are alright. This Sessamaru needs a bath to be drawn and appropriate garment to be prepared, he declared curtly, cutting off his minder's words and making the pair of servants waiting in his rooms scurry away to oblige his orders after bowing deeply. The minder blinked at the sight of Naruto and his hand subconsciously rested on his sword hilt. Young lord, who is this? He asked cautiously. Sessamaru looked back over his shoulder. He is mine, he declared simply as if it was obvious. Then a considering countenance crossed his face as he locked his gaze with Naruto's. This Sessamaru is Sessamaru, heir to the West. What does this Sessamaru call you? My name is Naruto you, he started confidently as usual and then faltered. Did he really have a right to take his parents' name? He slightly shook his head. No, he did not. Not when it was he who killed them. He effortlessly forced another smile to his lips. That he could do without fault. He had a lot of practice smiling when not feeling like it. Just Naruto, Dadabayo. Sessamaru, who was only about half a hand taller than him, nodded his head gravely, as if that was the most serious discussion he had ever had in his life. But Naruto didn't mind. The other boy seemed kind enough and accepted him for what he was. He at least could do the same for him, despite his strange manner of speaking and lordly attitude. But then again, there were stranger people he knew back in the village. He suppressed memories of his old home and followed the other boy into a marbled bathroom with a gigantic pool in the middle, unwittingly ignoring the minder, who sputtered behind them. Sessamaru carelessly shrugged off his sumptuous and bloodied kimono and beckoned Naruto to join him in the hot water when the latter caught sight of his bandages. What happened? The young heir carelessly lifted a shoulder. It is of no consequence. Naruto gaped. But you are hurt. That is pretty important to me. After all, Sessamaru had said they were to become family and family cared for one another, right? He wasn't perfectly sure. But he assumed family was automatically precious people. And at least he had learned that one had to protect their precious people. Even though it seemed he only had the other demon boy left and the rest of them couldn't even stand his presence anymore. Taken aback by the vehemence of that exclamation, Sessamaru blinked 2 times then added. An assassin tried to kill this Sessamaru. Now they are dead. Then he averted his gaze again and it looked like he studied something far away. Come in. Your reek offends this Sessamaru's nose. Torn between sorrow, for he could see clearly that the kill weighed on his soul after having experienced that feeling recently, if differently, and indignation over the insult though it was true, he chose to approach the pool silently for once. When he shrugged off his baggy overall, he noticed faintly he had a fluffy red tail attached to his backside. He blinked and took another look. Then he screamed high-pitched like a little girl, even though he would later deny that with all his might. Sessamaru, his minder and his 2 servants watched in disbelief as Naruto was running around stark naked in a circle, trying to get a good look on his tail. The shinobi in training couldn't believe his eyes. Since when had that been there? Was that the Kyuubi's fault? Suddenly he paused and looked at his stomach. He knew one could not normally see the seal. But a feeling in his gut told him that it wasn't there anymore. As well as the Kyuubi. He couldn't explain how he knew it. It was like there had been a humming in the back of his mind his whole life that he never even noticed. Not until it was gone. And suddenly everything was silent. He looked at his hands and noticed they rather resembled the claws he had had when overcome by the Kyuubi's power. Along his shoulders, elbows, waist and knees double orange stripes marked his body. His feet, too, seemed to be morphed into something looking like a crossbreed between normal feet and a predator's elongated paws. He cautiously lifted his clawed fingers to his face and felt his smooth, slightly broader than usual whisker marks. If he could, he'd bet they were orange as well. At least it was a color he liked. Naruto. His ear twitched slightly and he subconsciously moved his hands to his still human but pointy-tipped feeling ears. He bit his lip. A canine drew blood. He would not panic. He would not panic. He would end Naruto, are you well? He screamed anew. I have pointy ears. And claws. And strange marks. And a bloody tail. How the hell do you think I feel? Sessamaru, completely unimpressed by his outburst, calmly inquired. You do realize you're Daiukai, do you not? This Sessamaru does not understand how you could have missed your birthmarks for a century and a half. Are you suffering from memory loss? The blonde-haired boy giggled at him incredulously. What the hell do you mean a century and a half? I am just over 12 years old. I didn't even know I was a demon until a couple of months ago. And how the bloody hell do you call this thing's birthmarks? Sessamaru's ears twitched on account of the other boy's volume. By the lords, he had one strong pair of lungs. Calm down. You are murdering this Sessamaru's ears. Hatsuo, take your hand off your blade. This Sessamaru is in no danger. Now, sit down. Numbly Naruto let himself fall into the pool. The hot water soothing his agitated body. Now explain yourself to this Sessamaru. Naruto hesitated just for a moment, then sighed. This boy was willing to be his family. He supposed one of them had to take the first step to build up the necessary trust between precious people. I used to be human. At that the golden eyes slightly widened, but the silver-haired boy stayed silent so he could speak freely. But on the day of my birth a powerful demon attacked and killed many people. They couldn't stop him, so the Hokage, the village leader sealed him inside me. Sessamaru snarled quietly. Not knowing whether this was a good or bad sight, Naruto hurriedly pointed on his stomach and further explained. There used to be a seal. I couldn't see it. But now that it is gone I feel that it isn't there anymore. Does that make sense? He didn't wait for a response and rambled on. And then the seal was weak or damaged or I don't know. But then I had the demon's power and could feel it and use it, and he faltered slightly. Everyone hates me, he whispered, but then picked up quickly, but then there was this strange light. And I don't know what happened. You were there and said we were family. And now we're here and my body changed and I don't feel the demon anymore. But I still feel his power. And it is all just very confusing. For a moment everything was quiet. Then the heir to the west approached him and sniffed. Afterwards he leaned back again, contemplating, and said. This Sessamaru believes you and that demon merged. While he and his power made you Daiukai, you retained your consciousness and control over that body. Naruto thought hard and nodded slowly. I think I understand. Suddenly he looked at the other boy with wide and clear blue eyes. Does that mean you don't want me anymore? I mean, now that you know I'm not a real demon and only became a demon, you know. Near the end his mumbling grew nearly incoherent. The gaze that Sessamaru regarded him with was cold and he grazed himself for yet another rejection because of what he was. He simply fitted nowhere. Neither real human nor born demon. Maybe it was better after all if this Sessamaru has claimed you as his own. You are Pack. You will honor this claim. To this Sessamaru you smell like Kitsune Daiukai. That means you are. You simply need to learn our customs. Now wash and sleep. This Sessamaru will announce you to the court tomorrow. He paused and looked at his attendants. And you will keep this story to yourselves. It was a very happy Naruto with his trademark grin that spent the rest of the bath in exhausted relief and unbelief. He still hadn't wrapped his head around the fact that he finally had someone that genuinely wanted him to be around. Lord Toga, your son has taken in a Kitsune Daiukai about the same age as himself. The Inu no Taisho twinkled lightly. Is that so? I suppose I will have a look at the pup tomorrow. He absent-mindedly stroked his lover's still flat stomach and inhaled her unique scent. That is not all, my lord. The Lord of the West drew his brows together. The art of the elevated brow would forever be denied to him. He let that particular skill gracefully for his wife and their child. The kid claims to have been fully human before merging with and ultimately becoming a yakai. Toga drew in a sharp breath. How extraordinary. Keep this story out of anyone's reach. And if Sessamaru is willing to accept a former human, then maybe there is hope for him after all. Perhaps he will desist from following his mother's footsteps. Hatsuo regarded his lord curiously. Would you then, finally, at least speak with your son? You do realize that this is all he ever wants. The long-suffering sigh echoed through the chamber. I honestly don't know. I don't want to repeat my mistakes once again. He is so much like his mother, not only in looks, but in mannerism, speech and thoughts. Yet he chose to be here, reinforced Hatsuo his position in the matter firmly. I suppose so. Fate. She smiled sweetly as she turned around to regard her visitor. Hello, my dear. You have finally been selfless, I see. Just like the sage. That has nothing to do with the old man, woman, he interrupted her harshly, you didn't exactly give me a choice. Her smile widened. Ah, but that is not exactly true, as you very well know, my dear. You could have continued on your path. I did not move your string apart from his. I simply put his onto a new path, one of his own choosing. You on the other hand had more choices than anyone before. You could have stayed on my predestined pattern. It has already repaired itself from my ripping his string out. Or you could have easily followed your vessel in his without paying the price. Yet you chose to create your own. I let the three of you free. Well, all that came before got two choices, you had three. And yet you accuse me of not giving you a choice. He snorted gruffly and stepped up to stand next to her and regard her intricate weavings. It had a multitude of colors and twists. Though a couple of times he saw strings of pure gold. Most of them dull and still in finished patterns, a few shining and moving seemingly on their own accord, their story not yet finished. Yeah, well, who in their right mind would have wanted to continue being imprisoned or enslaved for another couple of eons? Free will is a fine thing, no matter the cost. She turned to him, surprised. You have changed more than anticipated. I honestly hadn't thought you would choose this path. But then, maybe I was influenced by those that came before. As he raised a reddish eyebrow, she explained. I have given all of your siblings the same choice in the past. Taken aback, his red mane flung around as he sharply tuned to face the goddess. She merely raised an elegant brow at the outburst, decidedly amused. What did you believe in all that time? I hadn't at one point or another given them a way out. You were merely the last one to choose. All of them declined and chose not to break free of my patterns. They thought the price too steep. It seems like you are the bravest of your siblings. She smiled freely at him and moved closer, a light hand on his bicep. Her full lips caressed his ear softly as she whispered. Either the wisest or the most foolish of them all. Her hot breath burned on his ear and not a pleasurable way. It was literally burning his essence away. Yet he could not move. I hope you are prepared for the future, my dear Kurama. Because even I cannot anticipate your path anymore. Suddenly she was gone and he knew she wouldn't let him find her again. Fate would choose the next time they spoke again. Kurama found he did not like this. At all. And he also knew he hadn't yet paid the full price and neither had Naruto. Not that he cared for the boy. You should never harm your siblings. They are your family and everything you have on this world. The old man's words were kind, loving. And you are also still connected. Harming your siblings will only harm yourselves. That is true for every family. He himself was only a small kid. But the old man's words seemed wise. Family was important. Then he paused. But aren't you family as well? Why can't we just stay with you? You know so much. The old man laughed lightly and caressed that particular spot behind his ear. He practically drooled from contentment. He really had to concentrate hard not to miss anything the old man said. Well, I suppose you could call me your father. But every kid must ultimately leave their parents to explore the world. It is also safer for you to stay apart. His earthy brother whined unhappily. But you said humans were kind. Why would it be unsafe? Deeply sighing, the old man moved on to pet the tanuki. I am sorry, son. But the world is not that simple. Where there is light, there is also darkness. For every human that means you well, there is one who does not. But do not worry yourselves. I have seen to it that the priests of your temples are trustworthy and loyal. But when can we see you again? Piped up the tiny voice of their turtle-like brother. I will miss you. Though his siblings did not see, he did. The old man faltered. His smile was sad. And he knew then that he would never see his father again. There will come a time when all of you must gather again and fight for what is right. But before that time you must first live and learn in this world. Otherwise, how would you know what you are protecting? His 8 siblings nodded eagerly, but he just looked at the old man and tried to memorize his face. Young lord, maybe you should wait with the announcement. Sesamara regarded his minder coolly, then disregarded him equally dispassionately in favor of striding into his guest chamber, which had never before in 150 years been occupied. Now, there was a boy psychologically and physically, even if not biologically, the same age as him sleeping not so soundly. He drew his brows together minimally and thoughtfully regarded the other boy. He was undeniably Kitsune Daiukai. He would undoubtedly grow either into a powerful ally or a powerful enemy. But that was not why he was here in his guest chamber. He had taken in the other boy on a whim. Because he was different and yet similar to himself. They had both been miserable yesterday. Still, he was not known to be compassionate nor caring, with good reason. He was simply not interested in anything else than pleasing his father. And look where that got me. Discarded for a human whore and a Hanyu bastard. The great dog general had fallen deep indeed. And his heir refused to follow his footsteps any longer. He would become powerful by himself, for himself. And he would be the best lord of the West there ever was. That still did not answer the question of Naruto's existence within his private chambers. He looked again at the sun-kissed colored boy and involuntarily smirked. Sun-kissed. Well, he was moon-blessed. They would make quite a pair. And it would be nice to have someone solely loyal to himself, not to his father. Someone he could actually rely on. He had no delusions. Hatsuo and his servants reported his every move. It seemed fate saw fit to bestow upon him a companion who valued family above all. Unlike his father. He paused. Fate. It must indeed have been fate. How unlikely was it that a companion that he didn't even know he longed for would arrive right in front of him by means neither of them could explain. It could of course always be an elaborate trap. But he could not see Naruto as that good an actor. And if he was, his story would have been more believable. No, this one time he wanted to believe. Believe in someone else than himself. So he gently nudged the restless boy to wake him up. And epically failed. Naruto just mumbled incoherently and turned around, pillow in a death grip. He sighed silently. It seemed this would need more than a gentle hand. After going through several means not only but including excessive noise, violence and blackmail, he finally found one that worked. A bucket of ice-cold water. He had no scruples whatsoever. He had tried to wake him gently first after all. And of course that tiny lift of his lips was completely imaginary as he handed the now grumpy but awakened boy a kimono. We will need to procure you an adequate wardrobe. You cannot use this Sessamaru's clothes indefinitely. Naruto lowered his head in shame. I'm sorry. I will work off whatever you pay for me. I really don't need that much. And I can. Cease this foolishness. This Sessamaru has named you Pack. Thus this Sessamaru will provide until you can take care of yourself. It is Pack law. This Sessamaru was named Hunter yesterday after all. Seeing Naruto's uncomprehending look, he elucidated. The pack provides for its own that aren't yet capable of doing so themselves. Within a pack it is the closest relative's duty to do so. Since this Sessamaru is your closest relative, this Sessamaru will provide. The hunter is every yokai above the age of 150 that passed their rite of passage. It is a rank that proves that one can contribute to the pack. This much talking outside of classes was certainly exhausting. But then again this was education and it was, as he had said, his responsibility to provide it. Naruto grinned all-encompassingly and to his utter mortification hugged the young lord. Thank you Sessamaru. For a moment he stood there frozen. Then, thankfully, the blonde Daikai removed himself from his body and he could breathe again. Not knowing how to deal with it, he nodded sharply and left the room, inwardly shaking. He couldn't remember when if he had ever been hugged before. He preoccupied himself by dressing in an elaborate white silk kimono with a magenta wave pattern and blue obi, choosing an equally deep blue haori with his mother's crescent moon insignia drawn in a white color. Of that he actually felt proud. He hadn't worn her crest since she left the palace, but it was oddly fitting to use it now. After all he did just decide to rebel against his father. When Naruto finally showed himself, he was barely adequately dressed. He inwardly sighed. It was obvious that no one had ever shown him how to wear a kimono with dignity and grace. So, as soon as he could grip him, he stripped the boy and redressed him, this time properly. When the kitsune whined about all that stuff being unnecessary, he calmly explained. It is not stupid. One will always evaluate you based on your appearance and posture first, your word second and your personality third. With proper presentation you can win a fight before it even started. Often without lifting a finger. At this he perked up visibly. So his companion was a fighter. That was good. Otherwise he wouldn't know how he would plan on beating the brashness out of him. The new sparring partner was always nice. If you look intimidating without seemingly trying to do so, a lot of weaklings won't bother you. It might even give you the edge in a fight against someone good because this might cause them to be wary. The wary hesitates. And you win the fight in exactly that moment. Naruto did look like he was suitably impressed, but also like this was going all over his head. Sessamaru decidedly lashed the final knot together and realized at that same moment that his little project was going to be a nerve-wracking challenge. But he had to admit. If this right now was anything to go by, it would be worth it. Naruto did look impressive with the right clothing. The kimono was, of course, mainly white. It was Sessamaru's favorite color after all. But the deep red turtle pattern suited the blonde. The obi was blue as a contrast as well as a tribute to his own garments. You look presentable. Let's go. We shall attend to this morning's meeting after all. Oh wait. I just wanted to ask one thing. He scratched his neck in a bashful manner. Well, are all people here yokai? Sessamaru inclined his head. This is one of the 4 yokai palaces after all. Humans tend to fear or want to try to kill our kind. They are not particularly dangerous, but annoying. Only a Maiko could even contemplate harming us, but those tend to be rather rare. Still, humans come in greater numbers and noise, so we avoid any interaction if not necessary. One only gets a headache by doing so. We do have a couple of human landowners that swore us allegiance and tribute for protection though. Naruto grumbled a little at the thought that humans were not considered a threat to demons, but followed nonetheless, contemplating the fact that humans tended to hate demons. That was something he all too well understood after all. Then he blinked in surprise. Hey, you have a tail, too. His excitement was apparently easy to spark. Of course this Sessamaru does. All young canine Daikai do. When one gets old enough, one will start wearing it as a pelt so it won't be a hindrance in a fight. Naruto hummed thoughtfully. What if I get more tails? The young lord blinked. That was actually a useful question. Kitsune do get more tails as they gain more power. But they usually call upon them when needed to channel that power and dismiss them when not. So more tails mean more power? Sesshomaru shook his head. No. That is only the case with Kitsune. Other yokai races have other indicators of power. But most commonly you should be able to feel their yoki. The blonde frowned in confusion, so he elaborated. It is one type of aura one eludes. Yoki is specific to yokai, and the amount of yoki should tell you a yokai's strength. Though more experienced yokai and nearly all Daiyokai tend to mask their yoki signature. Surprised, a Kitsune stared at him. He looked like he had had an enlightenment. So basically it is like chakra. Can you also use it to leap very high, run up a wall and walk on water? Impressed was the wrong word. The Inu Daiyokai was positively floored. He had thought it would take longer to explain the malleability of yoki to him. But it seemed his young companion had succeeded in surprising him once more. Indeed, he near purred, this Sesshomaru is currently working on walking on air. The look of awe on the other's face definitely stoke him the right way. Now desist from doing anything stupid. Don't talk unless spoken to. We will enter the audience hall during session. Just be respectful and try not to insult anyone, but also don't back down from a challenge. That would be considered weak. The young heir calmly walked inside, Naruto hot on his heels. His father was leading today's audiences and listened calmly to a dispute between two landowners. Instead of taking the right-hand place next to the lord, Sesshomaru roamed the line of petitioners, which were quick to make way, until he was first in line after the current dispute. It was uncouth to interrupt a discussion in this hall after all, no matter which lowly peasants were talking. Though those did tend to end quicker whenever a Daiyokai stood next in line. Consequently his father beckoned him forward quite soon, his face unreadable. Petitioner, what is it you desire today at this court? My lord, this Sesshomaru, heir to the west, seeks to add strength to our pack. This Sesshomaru will take in this pup as his own. Surprised mutterings started all throughout the hall, and the Inu no Taisho had to hold up his hand to rein in his subjects. You are still a pup yourself. You wouldn't know how to raise one. Let alone one not of our kind. Proudly he held his head higher and looked his father defiantly in his eyes. His father must have noticed his mother's crest. He couldn't not notice. And he would know what it would mean. His son was on warpath. This Sesshomaru does not seek to raise this pup as his own pup. This Sesshomaru intends to take this pup as his little brother. Shock and surprise. As well as wariness. If he hadn't studied his facial expressions for years, he wouldn't have noticed them rushing through his stoic features. He felt rather than saw Naruto wordlessly gaping at him as he was busy not to miss anything on his father's face. You would ask this Toga to take this pup as his own? There was a certain amount of incredulity behind the question and he had a hard time not to smirk. He nonchalantly regarded him. It is not like you would have to do anything, Toga-sama. This Sesshomaru takes full responsibility for the pup. As a hunter of the pack it is this Sesshomaru's privilege and duty to provide for his own. Not to mention, his father having never before cared to take responsibility. His father now frowned. He probably couldn't for the life of him figure out what his son wished to accomplish with this petition. You are aware that this pup would never inherit anything. Sesshomaru nodded and a small smile laid on his lips. It made the lords and ladies all the more interested in the subtext challenge that no one seemed to decipher yet. But they would soon. His smile widened and turned cold. Indeed. This Sesshomaru is fully aware of the fact that neither ward nor bastard nor Hanyu could ever inherit the West. It is merely this Sesshomaru's desire to add this pup to the pack and call him brother. Golden eyes met their mirror images. None backed down. Minutes ran by and no one dared speak. He felt Naruto opening his mouth to say something, but he gripped his arm hard in warning and the Kitsune closed it again. Never once he took his eyes off. The silent match between lord and heir could have continued many more hours if Utashi had not stepped forward and bowed deeply. If I may submit a suggestion, my lords. The Ino no Taisho nodded but never broke eye contact with his son. My lord Toga, dine with the pup, get to know him and decide at the next meeting whether you wish to accept your son's petition. After a couple of more moments had passed, he inclined his head. Agreed. Pup, you will dine with this Toga tonight at dusk. He visibly hesitated, then added. As well as this Toga's son. Sesshomaru's jaw clenched. The fact alone that he needed an invitation to dine with his father was ridiculous. Not to mention the reluctance with which it was given. Since he did not trust his voice, he merely inclined his head and purposefully strode out of the hall, Naruto hastily catching up to him, his jaw wide open. I really don't want to be the cause for you and your dad to fight, he blurted out as soon as they were outside. The silver-haired boy raised an eyebrow and looked at him incredulously. You cannot be serious. I have not dined with him outside a feast for over a century. You would be the very last issue on a very long list of issues standing between us." Naruto stared at him. He waited patiently for the blonde's mind to start working again. He couldn't decide whether this was a source of constant entertainment or annoyance. Probably both. "You talk normal. Just like I do," he exclaimed, completely shocked. Suppressing a smirk, he answered. "This Sessamaru does as he wishes. Your concerns were so ridiculous, they were not worth a proper answer. But we digress. We need to get you a proper wardrobe for the time being. And afterwards this Sessamaru thought of giving you a tour through the palace." With a cry of enthusiasm, Naruto dashed away only to come back right after, as he didn't know the way. The Inu sighed. Yes, this boy would cause him more than one headache. Why again did he think this a good idea? "I could stay here for the rest of my life." Amused, the heir to the west started to pet one of the horses. "Are you sure? I believe Jin would reward me immensely if I told her she could find you here." "You wouldn't dare," exclaimed Naruto, not far from despair. That damn woman was one of the few spider yokai living in the palace and had taken a particular liking to him because of his unusual coloring. She had called him exotic and forced him to pose for her wearing the most ridiculous outfits. All the while Sessamaru was standing in a shady corner, equally trying to get a glimpse for his own amusement as well as not to get caught by the spider yokai as well. It had taken him hours to get out of her clothing shop. On the upside of things though, he was pretty certain he had a good chance at getting orange kimonos from that thrice-damned woman. She'd better comply, otherwise his efforts had gone to waste and he would no longer be able to be held accountable for his actions. Mainly pranking. "While we are at the stables, this Sessamaru would like to introduce you to someone. Come." He led the kitsune to the back part of the stables and pulled him into the last box, which was a little bigger than the others. Inside there were two heads and one tail connected through a scaly body. Their egg was a token of peace and friendship from the dragon yokai upon the Sessamaru's birth. This is Ah and this is Un. They hatched 96 years ago. Naruto curiously approached and let the 1-2 creatures sniff his hand. Then lick him. "You." He hastily withdrew his hand and jumped a couple of feet back, warily keeping his eyes on the pet dragon that was about as tall as the boy. In spite of himself, Sessamaru felt a small smile creep on his face. "They seem to like you. It is rare. Ever since they hatched they only permitted the Sessamaru near them without a fuss. It seemed like they felt their master's approval of the kitsune." This made the yellow-haired boy radiant like the sun. "Really? Awesome, Dadabeo. They are so cool." And then he was next to the two-headed dragon again, petting and cooing the creature like there was no tomorrow. And to Sessamaru's great amusement as well as embarrassment, the fierce and proud dragon was soon ice-melting under the other's hands, purring and offering its belly like a common house cat. "This Sessamaru's father will try to make you doubt," he said suddenly, startling both kitsune and dragon. Blue, split-pupilled eyes shot up to him and the petting hand stayed. As previously said, there are a lot of issues between this Sessamaru and his father. This Sessamaru does not know why, but Toga-same always seems to try to spoil everything. He will make you doubt this Sessamaru. For a little while Naruto just looked at him. Then he asked seriously. "Do you really want to be my brother or did you just say that to make him angry?" His lips twitched. That is an apt observation indeed. This Sessamaru said it in spite, to hurt his father. "You should know that the Lord of the West entertains a prostitute and is expecting an illegitimate child. Even though his mate still lives, which is a disgrace in itself, and he knows that this Sessamaru would disapprove. But despite all that, it does not make this Sessamaru's desire for a genuine companion any less true." He averted his gaze and contemplated whether he should talk further. But once begun, he could not stop himself. Over a century of loneliness and not being able to trust anyone had taken a toll on him. If he had to endure this any longer, he wasn't sure he would recognize himself in the end. So the truth spilled out of him without any real choice. It was now or never, confiding in anyone ever again. "Everyone you see in this castle is sworn to its lord and will gladly sell out this Sessamaru if it benefits them, to the Lord of the West or any other person that would reward them. This Sessamaru has never known someone who would truly take his side or even hold his confidence." His voice faltered and he had to swallow heavily. Then he looked directly into the blue eyes. "I will take you however you want. As a brother or simply a companion. It doesn't matter. Just don't betray me. Not like I was betrayed before. If anyone could do it, then it would be the one fate had chosen for him." The expected outrage in the other's gaze. Betrayal or the feeling of being exploited. But Naruto simply and easily grinned. "Alright." Sessamaru blinked, unsure whether he had heard correctly. "I would never betray you, you know. That is just mean. I would never, ever betray my precious people. People shouldn't do that ever." His grin widened. "This is going to be so great. I will be the best brother ever, Dadabeo." And then he hugged Sessamaru. The latter seriously reconsidered their arrangement. Did brothers really hug each other? He didn't know any siblings that touchy. Then again the ones he knew were old and grumpy. But still, what was one supposed to do when hugged? As Naruto didn't seem intent on releasing him anytime soon and he felt awkward, he tried to alleviate that feeling by hesitantly and clumsily patting the other's back. It did seem to be the appropriate response because the kid soon let him go and grinned at him. He had never seen a happier face. Unconsciously his lips tugged upwards as well, relief clearly visible in his golden eyes. Maybe he made the right choice in believing in fate. Maybe fate would guide him so he would not get hurt again. "Milady." Kimmy looked up from her lavish dive-in to see her master of whispers approach. Inquisitively she crooked an eyebrow. He bowed deeply. "Milady, Sesamaro of the West made a petition today." That got her attention. After all, it was not every day that the boy swallowed his immense pride and lowered himself to actually ask for something. What was it then he desired? Her servant gulped a little like every time his mistress had that hungry, dangerous grin on her lips. It made him uncomfortable even after all those centuries in her service. He asked his father to allow him to add a kitsune pup about his age to the pack as his brother. That certainly got her by surprise. She had known that the small Inu had a sentimental side. But she had believed that he had shed this weakness by now. Somehow she was severely disappointed. She had thought him better than this. "Milady, that is not all." Again she lifted her brow. Rarely she had to speak for herself. Her servants had learned to tend to her every whim without so much as a word from her. He wore the crest of the crescent moon and never once backed down from his father's challenge to his claim. Her ever-present playful smile widened. Well, it seemed the pup had finally grown a pair. And he was on warpath. That was something she could work with. Perhaps it was time to once again direct the fate of the world. "Monster. We don't want you. Stay away and never come back or we will hurt you much worse." The small boy crawled backwards, tears in his eyes. He didn't understand. Why? Why did everyone seem to hate him? It wasn't fair. He didn't do anything to deserve it, did he? He wanted to defend himself, say something, anything, but one of the other kids kicked him hard into his already injured stomach. It hurt. It hurt so much he wasn't sure he would survive this. Then again, he always thought that when the older orphans beat him bloody. But he did. He always did. Oh, Kami, why did he always live on? He was sick of it. And apparently the other kids were finally sick of him, too. They left him for dead in a dark alley and all he could do was curl up and pretend it didn't happen, that it didn't hurt. Pretend that he didn't want to die. He never did anyway. Oh, he probably came close or at least felt like it. But the next day or the one after that at the latest, he was up and running again. Well, broken bones did take a little more time. But not that much more. People thought him unnatural, a freak, a monster. He didn't understand. Then, last week, a boy had fallen off a tree and broken his arm. He still could not move it in the slightest. There had been a nurse visiting and she had told the boy that he shouldn't move for the next couple of weeks if he ever wanted it to heal properly. He himself was confused. Why would it take the other boy so long to heal when he himself healed nearly overnight, even without a nurse? That was when he finally understood a little why people thought him a monster. He wasn't normal. He never was and never would be. He would always be alone. He wanted to die. But the monster side of him never let him. He woke with a strangled gasp. His heart, his actual, physical heart was hammering wildly. Oh, Kami, how he had forgotten what that felt like. But he didn't relish it. He couldn't concentrate on it. His thoughts still lingered on his dream. Those feelings. That brat. He hated him like he hated all those that came before. Like he hated all humans. Not all of them, a voice idly whispered in the back of his head, but he ignored it. He hated humans. He hated the worlds. He hated fate. He simply hated. And that was the end of it. But it didn't make his uncontrolled thoughts, those damned feelings, go away. Why did he feel them now anyways? He knew what had happened. He had been there. Kami, he had relished it. So why did it make him feel hurt now? Growling, he teared at his hair, wanting to make the feelings go away. But they persisted. Furiously he roared and hit the floor next to him. It crumpled like crushed dry leaves. No. Snarling, his eyes frantically searched the blackness surrounding him for something, anything, to distract him from leaves. He found nothing. His heart fluttered frantically. His pupils were dilated, one couldn't even see a trace of red in them. He was hyperventilating. He had to stop. Finally he forcefully calmed himself. It wouldn't do to lose consciousness over something so trivial. He had known what would happen. Heck, he had waited for it to start. That still didn't mean he liked it. Oh no, he would gladly skip this part of the price. He couldn't, though. He was stuck with those bloody memories, those bloody feelings. And he had to endure them if he ever wanted to keep his freedom. That is, if he ever found a way out of this fucking non-dimension that ran outside of time and space. He let his head fall into his clawed hands. Boy, he was so fucked up. Sessamaru was regretting ever having laid eyes on the sun-kissed kitsune and idly wondered whether he had been a serial killer of pups and a cannibal on top or worse in his last life to deserve this. But then again, he felt oddly warm in his chest. It was strange. He couldn't recall ever feeling like this. Naruto was shouting for the life of him and insulting his father every 2 seconds. He should be mortified by his manners. Well, he was. But he also felt gratitude. Unending relief and appreciation because someone finally stood up for him. Was on his side on the cost of his own life. Though, he somewhat doubted, Naruto knew how dangerous it was to insult the Lord of the West at his own dinner table in his own palace, surrounded by his loyal vassals. No matter how obvious that little fact was. But he got the feeling that this disregard of obvious details was going to be a reoccurring circumstance with the blonde. Well, he meant well. If they died as a result, the Inu between them would die happily at least. You ignore your own son. Bastard, you should take responsibility. He's family and family means precious people and precious people are meant to be protected. I don't care who the hell you think you are, but that doesn't give you the right to just abandon your kid and replace him. That is so not cool. And then you try to take away his new brother, too. Well, guess what? I'm staying by his side, whether you like it or not, Dadabeo. At least one of us has to protect his precious people. You're right, Toga hastily replied and cut off the kitsune's seemingly endless stream of words. By the gods, Sessamaru would do his damned best to never be at the receiving end of such a talk. You are absolutely right. I should have never thought of depriving my son of your presence. First thing tomorrow, I will announce my acceptance to Sessamaru's claim of you. You have my word, Naruto-san. I shall not stay in your way. He hesitated, wind knocked out of his sail, since his goal was achieved but still not completely satisfied. Well, good. The blonde huffed and sat back into his seat, somewhat mollified. During the last hour, Sessamaru hadn't even dared to voice a word. Even now, he could not talk. He was too baffled by the fact that Naruto had managed to make the great dog general somewhat apologize and blatantly admit a fault of his. Not to mention, he had even forgotten to use the royal etiquette of speech. Even though his father was rather relaxed and talked like a commoner with his closest advisors and apparently his lover, he never dropped the royal speech in front of strangers. That in itself was an outstanding achievement to be acknowledged. Not to mention that he knew his father and his expressions. The one he made now was not only shocked but also full of newfound respect. That wasn't easily accomplished either. Well. Let's finish our meal, the Lord of the West awkwardly tried to make peace. Naruto nodded slightly pacified and continued to gobble down his food, no table manners whatsoever. Inwardly the young heir cringed. That, he really had to rectify. This luckily was a private dinner. If there had been anyone else, it would have been a huge scandal. After a couple of silent minutes, Toga tentatively asked. Say, Naruto-san, what is that symbol you bear on your forehead? This Toga does not recognize it. Naruto perked up, then his face darkened a little, before he forced a smile on his face. That is the symbol of Konoha, my home village. It's a ninja village. Every shinobi gets a hit I-8 with it when they graduate from the academy. Toga nodded slightly. Then it is a mark of passage. To show the world that you can take care of yourself and contribute to the society. The blonde scratched his head. Yeah, I guess. I mean, when you pass, you get into a team and you start doing paid missions. I thought they would be awesome, but we ended up doing a bunch of really annoying chores. But I was really happy when I finally got mine a couple of months back. His smile waned a little, but he struggled to keep it on. He mostly succeeded. He was practiced after all. Still, he fooled neither Inu demon at the table, so the topic was dropped. Heavy silence reigned. Then, against all spurning all reason, Naruto smiled a true and wide smile. So, do you guys allow pranks in the castle? Yes, Sessamaru was definitely regretting ever having laid eyes on him. Thank you. Sleepily, Naruto turned around in his fluffy and comfortable bed and looked up at Sessamaru, who was standing in the doorway, a soft candlelight in the background, shadowing his features and hiding them from the world. Nonetheless, the usually thick-headed genin knew what the other boy felt. He had felt it too. When the young heir admitted craving his presence, a loyal and steady one, he had felt like crying as well. For the first time someone had actually and genuinely wanted him. It was not that hard a deduction to make from there that the other boy felt the same. Never before had he really believed in a higher power. Actually, he never really gave it a moment's thought. But he was willing to do so now because it seemed someone had finally heard both their prayers. And had brought the kindred souls together. Of course, he replied softly for once, it's what brothers are for, right? HN. He didn't move or say anything else, but for Naruto it was enough. He had after all been in a class with Uchiha Sasuke for several years and then in a team. So he really didn't need a translation. He already knew what it meant and it warmed his heart from inside out. He fell asleep with the reassuring presence of his brother watching over him. He was bored. Unspeakably bored. One day blended into another. 1 year, dozens of years passed after another without him taking notice. Every once in a while there was a human or two who thought of gaining more power by defeating or capturing him. As if he would let them treat him like a simple beast. Still, it was lonely and boring. Especially since the time of the humans worshipping him had long passed. Oh, they did leave food at the foot of the temple so as to not anger him. But they feared him and never came any closer. He had no company, no new books, no distraction. He didn't even remember how much time had passed since the last of his priests had died in an attack. Idly, he wondered what had happened to his siblings. Did they feel the same uselessness of life? Did they miss their family, their father, like he did? He was not sure. So much time had passed, there was no telling what had become of them. Maybe unlike him, they had found some meaning in life. He wished he could ask them himself. Everything inside him, his very soul, demanded he leave and seek them out. He craved for them, as he did for the sage. But he did not. He could not. He had promised the old man he would wait for the right time. To stay apart until fate brought them together to fulfill the prophecy. Even though he could not fathom how there could ever be anyone even as remotely good as he had been. There would never be a second sage. Still, a kitsune never breaks a promise and he would not begin either. So he stayed and remained as time passed, the years ever changing. Sleeping most of the time. Because while sleeping, he could dream at least. There he could. He did not know what it was, but he started from his slumber and instinctively crouched into a defensive position. Not a heartbeat later a shadow lunged itself at him with clearly malicious intent. Of course, a puny human could never really harm him, not nowadays at least, and he deflected each blow. Somewhat amused by the distraction the intruder posed, he gathered just the tiniest amount of chakra and let it free. After all, he did not want to destroy his home. But the annoying human assailant dodged swiftly and continued the attack. Only to be blown back by one of his tails. The human let a bomb fall and enveloped himself in smoke. His nose itched. He never liked to be unable to smell something. The intruder was becoming progressively troublesome. Better to end this swiftly before he became a nuisance. But before he could do something to that effect, he felt an enormous amount of chakra convoluting. Then the smoke cleared and gave way for a purple construct of pure chakra. His stomach twisted uncomfortably. He hadn't felt power like this since the two brats of his old man. Still, it wasn't nearly enough to be dangerous. Only unsettling. Yes, that was the word he was looking for. He was simply slightly perturbed. Defending was becoming increasingly difficult, but nothing he couldn't handle. Regardless, it was definitely strange to meet a human with power rivaling one of the brats. Were the humans not becoming weaker with each generation? Or was this finally the one he had been waiting for? But then, why would he attack him? No, he concluded, if he was the one, then they would not be fighting. This was something different. Something he didn't know. And that was worrying. He didn't like not knowing. After all these centuries, there wasn't much he did not know. Suddenly, while he had been preoccupied, the man was directly in front of him. A cold shiver ran over him as he looked him into the eyes. They were blood red with black markings. Then he knew no more. He was in a strange place. For the first time in centuries, he was away from his temple and it frightened him. He did not know what or where this place was, but he didn't like it. It was all red haze and no end in sight. He felt strangely oppressed, couldn't hold on to a single thought, couldn't even form one. He felt strangely empty of emotions like freshly fallen snow, untouched, undisturbed, cold. Images flickered by. Humans screaming, fighting, fleeing, dying. The taste of copper and iron in his mouth. Things crushed under his paws. Wounds ignored. Only destruction. Then there was a new picture, nearly unnoticed. A red-headed woman. Some signs. Words. A seal. Then power. Chakra that rammed into him with a force he had never known before. It pulled at his very soul. He couldn't escape it. He could do nothing. Nothing at all. The hazy feeling of the eye technique faded away for a harsh reality. For the first time in his life, he felt real pain. Agony. He screamed. Begged. Cried. No one heard. When he woke, there were tear streaks on his cheeks. His body was convoluting in pain, physical and emotional alike. He couldn't fathom how anyone could stand that kind of pain. Loss. Betrayal. Fear. Anger. Hatred. He shuddered and cried even harder. Only after what felt like an eternity, he noticed warmth enveloping him. A pair of strong, lithe arms hugged him close to a familiar-smelling chest, preventing him from doing himself harm. Sesamaranai, he thought. His new brother was there. He was not alone. Someone cared. He snuggled himself closer into the other boy's body and cried even harder. No words were said. Nothing else was heard. Nothing moved. They simply sat there, arms around each other and hanging on for dear life. Do you have any idea what you have done? Fate calmly regarded her brother and didn't even twitch as his aura unfurled itself and started to loom over her. Put that away, brother mine. No need for such theatrics. The cloud of power condensed into a thick oily mass, visible to a point that even civilian humans would be able to see it. His face darkened and he threateningly stepped closer until she could nearly feel his breath on her skin. No need. Dear sister mine, you do realize that you just changed the fates of not only 2 lives but 2 worlds. Sesshomaru was destined to help against and deliver the final blow against Naraku so that he does not take over the world and the Shiken Maiko could finally get rid of that damn jewel that has been plaguing Ito since the beginning of time. And don't even get me started on Naruto. He is the bloody reincarnation of Asura. Asura. You should never mess with the sage's sons. And he was his final reincarnation. He was supposed to bring an end to the curse between brothers. To save his world from Kagaya, who is guess what the threat that has been looming over the elemental nation since their founding. 2 worlds. Fate, why don't you understand? You have doomed 2 worlds to their respective apocalypses. Are you out of your mind? Towards the end, he had been shouting, nearly screeching really. Fate leaned back a bit, looking at him warily. As I said. No need to panic. There was a definite twitch in his eye there. He looked ready to kneel over from agitation. So she slowly put a hand on his shoulder, as if she was afraid he would shy away from her. Calm, Justice. Think about it. All this suffering they would have otherwise endured. It was not right to expect this from them. Just for a second he looked her straight into the eyes. Then his whole posture crumbled and he sighed in defeat, the sound edging on a groan. But neither was condemning 2 worlds to the unknown when they could have had peace. There was no right or wrong in that decision. I just wished you would at least ask before you potentially prevent the prevention of 2 apocalypses. She smiled and kissed him lightly on the nose. I know. You say that every time and in the end we usually work something out anyways. Just because I cannot weave their path anymore doesn't mean I am abandoning them. Just because my hands are tied doesn't mean you can't interfere. Granted, your reach will be restricted, but it is doable. I really believe they can do better than I weaved. He shook his head in despair. I don't know. You have never changed something of this magnitude before. This is big. Like world-changing big. There will be repercussions. Order and chaos will interfere now that you can't anymore. And what will you do then? You know, they don't have a shred of mercy. You have made them fair game to anyone. When silence was his only answer, he closed his eyes and hung his head. He hadn't expected his sorrows to be assuaged by her, but thinking and living it were different. Let's just hope they can handle it. Order has just made her first move. When he woke up, he had a godforsaken headache. What, by Kami, had he been doing to get it? As far as he remembered, he had never even touched the sake his sensei and his friends loved so much. That left a hit on the head as the only explanation. Still, he couldn't recall such an occurrence. Actually, he couldn't recall much at all. The slight panic made his heart race a little, but he forced himself to stay calm and not to move. If he had indeed been hit on the head, he might still be surrounded by enemies. So he better not give any indices about his awakening before he could access the situation. Sensei would be so proud of him, he thought wryly. Now focused on his task, he sharpened his senses and took in his surroundings. He laid on a bed, unrestrained. So he might be amongst friends. Next, he registered a familiar smell. He was in a hospital. Then he heard the sound of unfamiliar people. There was near silent sniffing. And an old man's voice telling someone that he couldn't believe it himself. He unconsciously frowned. Believe what? Ah, he is waking up, the old man said calmly with a note of anticipation. His advantage gone, he finally opened his eyes, adjusting them as fast as possible. He looked around, his head still pounding. He was indeed in a hospital room by the looks of it. There was the old man. He wore the Hokage's hat. But he wasn't the Hokage, was he? Behind the man there stood 2 men wearing Konoha's hit I-8, one having the features of Inara, while the other resembled Yamanaka. He looked at his left, where he had heard the sniffing from. For a moment, he mistook him for someone else. Then he saw minuscule differences. The man had the same shocking silver hair, but a hit I-8 that covered one of his eyes. His face held slightly different features and was completely blank, devoid of emotion. Behind him was a complete stranger with a scarred face, who still wore the Konoha headband. Hello, my boy. Can you tell us your name and the last thing you remember? His gaze snapped back to the old man, who looked somewhat familiar, still debating whether to trust him or not. Then again, his memories were somewhat screwed, they wore Konoha symbols, and he couldn't possibly have information worthy of such an elaborate scam. He figured something must have happened while he was out cold. My name is Namikaze Minato, genin of Konoha. Where is Jiraiya-sensei? And who are you? Where is Sandaime-sama? The faker not Hokage looked over his head towards the silver-haired guy and the scarred face, looked back at him and took a deep breath. Minato-san, it is important that you tell me the last thing you remember. And maybe have Inoichi have a look at you. Then we will answer your questions. Alright. Reluctantly nodding, he replied hesitantly, while concentrating. I don't remember much. We were just back from our first mission as a team in Wave Country. My teammates were fooling around. Jiraiya-sensei invited us to some ramen. He shook his head. Then nothing. I wake up here with a massive headache. Burrowing his frown, the old man nodded gravely. If you don't mind, I would like to have Yamanaka Inoichi have a look at your mind. Seeing that he didn't exactly have much choice in the matter, he nodded tensely. Again, he reminded himself that he didn't have any valuable information since he was just a genin. And he did hear about a Yamanaka Inoichi before. He was the next in line to be clan head if he remembered correctly. Though he couldn't remember his age. Still, he was good, really good. Minato nearly couldn't feel his presence in his mind. After a couple of minutes, the Yamanaka retreated and nodded sharply to the old man, who sighed and then looked at him what? Sadly. Minato-san, I am the Sandaime Hokage. I know, it must be a shock, but listen to me closely. You seem to have moved in time. Or rather, you have been reanimated since your corpse is gone. The boy blinked a couple of times, unsure whether he had heard correctly. I am sorry to say that you have been dead for over 12 years now. Ironically, you died at the age of 24. It means that from your perspective you are 24 years into the future. That was the last thing he heard before he passed out cold again. Waking up felt wonderful. It just took him a while to understand why. Then he remembered last night and the nightmare. A smile crossed his lips as he gratefully looked next to him where his brother laid. It seemed he had stayed the whole night until he himself fell asleep. Naruto's heart clenched. He never had anyone that cared even remotely enough to comfort him, let alone to stay by his side. Sesshomaru's eyelids fluttered. Golden eyes transfixed upon him immediately. Are you well? That question alone nearly made him cry. Yes, he whispered, tea was just a nightmare. He shuddered a little, and the Inuyasha drew him closer. He inhaled the now familiar scent and smiled blindingly. Thank you, Nai. His brother's gaze softened and spoke out loud, even if his voice didn't. Then he sat up. Come on, little brother. Let us get prepared for the day. This Sesshomaru is sure Jin has your first batch of clothing ready. Naruto spluttered. His mind couldn't work out what he was more indignant about, the little or this blatant usage of his fear of Jin. Then he finally settled for. Little brother. I am just as tall as you, Dadabeo. A young heir lifted an eyebrow in bemusement. Really? This Sesshomaru did not notice. Then again, you are well over a century younger, even if we are psychologically and physically about the same age. The blonde huffed in annoyance, but couldn't really find an argument against that. Well, he could use his unique logic to point out that he was more magnanimous, intelligent and stronger than the Inu, but something deep inside him secretly wanted to be the younger brother. After all, it was a big brother's duty to care for the younger one, was it not? And he really wanted, no craved for, such treatment, so he pretended to be sullen, while secretly enjoying it and silently following his brother outside without further complaint. Sesshomaru had to admit that he was slightly impressed, even though he already knew what kind of wonders Jin could fabricate with enough time and silk. The kitsune looked pretty good in his new kimono and seemed to take a certain amount of pride in his new attire. It suited him. He didn't mean the clothes, well that as well, but his attitude. Naruto had begun to bear a self-confidence not unlike his own, but sunnier in disposition. This Sesshomaru's normal days include educational lessons in the morning, training in the afternoon and recreational time in the evening. Social gatherings or duties are few and far between in this century. You should probably join this schedule. Blue eyes lit up in anticipation. Training. Cool. I want to go train now. Can we? Aniki? Please. The young heir had serious difficulties to ignore the imploring, big eyes batting their lashes at him like the little puppy he was. Still, he had to remain stern or he knew they would never educationally progress. Not now, Naruto-kun. It is morning. Thus, we must adhere to the schedule. We will assess your educational prowess first, before testing your physical one, alright. The blonde pouted but nodded sullenly. Sesshomaru softened a little. What is it, Ataudo? Blinking slightly, probably in light of his perceptiveness, he admitted. I suck in classes and school and stuff. He hid his face in shame and drew his shoulders up close. Well, of course. His head snapped back up and stared at him, visibly hurt. You said you were 12 years of age. Even if you started as a toddler, there is no way you could already know everything sufficiently. That is one of the reasons human lives seem so miserable to this Sesshomaru. Their mortality really is not their fault, but it does not lessen the fact that their lifespans are incredibly short. Now that you are Daiukai, you have all the time you need to perfect whatever skill you so require or desire. And you are also as of today officially a ward of the West. That means you will never have a lack of competent teachers. Furthermore, this Sesshomaru promises to help with anything else you need. Again, he was enveloped in an embrace. If this did go on, maybe he would get used to it in time. Now though, he still felt a little awkward. But the gratitude of his brother was all that really mattered in the end. Naruto, as it turned out, was a complete and utter imbecile. He was severely lacking in any area of knowledge, mannerisms and political, as well as economical prudence. On a brighter note, they also worked out that Naruto must have crossed over from another world, for he did not recognize any of the lands, in addition to never having met another demon before. His little brother did seem conflicted at first, but finally settled for feeling relieved that no hateful villager he knew would ever hurt him again and for being simply happy because he had a brother and a home now. It was baffling how easily he could content himself. Finally it was time for them to head out to the training area and Sesshomaru already braced himself for another walking disaster. After all, for all his strength of character that the young heir really admired, Naruto had turned out to be below average in anything else. It didn't faze the Inuyasha. After all, those could be learned. Qualities like loyalty and kindness could not. And those were the ones that really mattered to him. Alright, little brother. This is Kasei. He is this Sesshomaru's main advising fight instructor. Let us have a light spar first to let him assess your abilities. Naruto grinningly agreed. Not wanting to hurt his little brother, he waited for him to make the first move. The fox demon did not disappoint in Sesshomaru's assumption that he had no patience and attacked right away with a full frontal assault. Lazily he evaded and stoked at his kidney. Or at least attempted to. Seriously, he had thought that this would be it. But Naruto surprised him and actually blocking the faster-than-human attack, spun around and replied with a punch of his own. The young heir was so surprised that it nearly hit him. Then he smiled and actually fought his little brother. He did not go all out but at least acknowledged his potential as a threat and put some serious effort in it. While sparring, he observed the kitsune and realized that he in fact used yoki to support his muscles, which enabled him to fight on a level that should not be possible for mere humans. It also wasn't something that he could have done instinctively. Harnessing and using yoki was a discipline that had to be learned the hard way. As such it was simply astounding that Naruto, who had professed to having been human until recently, was indeed capable of such. He narrowed his eyes in contemplation. If he was capable of doing this much, how far along was he actually in the usage of yoki? He backed off a little and concentrated his energy into its natural choice of weapon. Naruto cried out in surprise, but deftly jumped away from the light whip and parried it with a kunai, which he still possessed from his original world. Boy. I thought we wouldn't use chakra. Sesshomaru just raised a brow. Naruto sulked a little, but then grinned foxishly. His hands met in a specific pose and he shouted. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Suddenly, there were a dozen Narutos. Sesshomaru blinked. Then the mass of Narutos was upon him and he was hard-pressed to keep up. He noticed that whenever he hit one of them strong enough, they would turn into smoke and evaporate. But they definitely had a body mass, so they were no mere illusions, like he had first assumed. The replicas also held a scent, made sound and emitted the same yoki aura. They were impossible to tell apart. Still he finally found the right one and pinned him down, breathing hard, heart pounding. There was a definite fright factor to being suddenly attacked by a dozen perfect copies of his sparring partner. He stared at the boy beneath him, still in shock. How did you do that? Naruto grinned and began opening his mouth to reply, but suddenly reason caught up with him and he pressed a hand against it. Hastily he lowered his voice and whispered into his little brother's ear. Never mind. We will talk about his later, in private. Don't tell anyone how you did this, do you understand? It is important. The fox demon stared up at him in surprise. But seeing the seriousness in his face, he understood somewhat and nodded. Sesshomaru stood up perfectly in time with Kasei coming to a halt next to them. He bowed deeply. My lords, that was an outstanding performance. Young heir, you did not take him seriously in the beginning and that nearly cost you the fight but overcame the surprise rather quickly. Young ward, you did better than I admittedly expected. I take it, you had prior lessons. Naruto nodded proudly but didn't say anything recalling his big brother's order. Well, your hand-to-hand combat skills and reflexes are a nice basis to build upon. And I take, you know your way around a kunai. Do you have proficiency in any other kind of weapon? The genin scratched his neck and thought for a moment. Not really. I can fight with a kunai and throw it. I can use some explosive tags with it. And I can somewhat throw senbon and shuriken. But I like kunai and bombs better. Other than that, I didn't really learn to use any other weapon. The instructor nodded in understanding. Ninja weapons. Toga-sama did mention that you come from a village that specializes in its uses. Sessamaru felt like a fool for not taking note of that himself. If you would like, I would also teach you the proper handling of at least a katana and recommend a teacher for any other weapon that interests you. I suggest the katana because it is the most noble of weapons. After all young lords should possess a certain amount of skill with it even if it isn't the best weapon for you. Naruto's grin widened. Like Anbu. Yeah, I would really like that. I would look so cool, Dadabeo. He seemed positively elated by the thought, though the other two males didn't exactly understand him. He didn't mind. His thoughts were already in the realm of dreams and imagination. Issei cleared his throat and proceeded. You are rather light and have a flexible and acrobatic fighting style without lacking in strength, which is good. In light of that, it would be prudent to have you learn the usage of any lighter kind of weapon and to increase your speed significantly. Using senbon and shuriken we can solidify. But we could also add chains, sickles or both in a kusarigama. Or sire tonfa. Maybe even a war fan, gunsen or tessen. It doesn't really matter. He became thoughtful. We should probably determine your primary element first though. It could give you an edge with the weapon of your choice. He thought for a moment, apparently considering if he had forgotten anything. Other than that, I would say, you should learn how to use a bow, just in case your only weapon at hand is a stick or something you found. But honestly, in that case use your claws or run. It is a fairly old school custom, usually used for lesser yokai and not powerful iukai. Naruto did look like he was a little overwhelmed, so Sessamaru put a hand on his shoulder and looked at him encouragingly. How about, we determine your element first and let you try out the other weapons another time. He did look a little relieved. Then he scrunched his nose in obvious confusion. Wait. What element? After his performance earlier, Sessamaru really had thought he would not need explain it. But he really should have known better by now. You can already use yoki. Naruto blinked uncomprehendingly. The chakra you mentioned. His face lit up in understanding. Seriously, he really had to give him lessons on masking his expressions. He was decidedly too easy to read. It was disturbing, really. Didn't he have any kind of self-preservation instinct? After learning to control yoki, one usually determines one's natural choice of weapon and one's primary yoki affinity. For example. He recalled the whip into his hand. This Sessamaru's natural choice when forming yoki into a weapon as a whip made of light. He dismissed it and poured pure yoki into his hands. Green, steaming poison formed. But when releasing yoki without a concrete form, it turns into poison. Thus poison is this Sessamaru's primary yoki affinity. His element. The fox demon slowly nodded in understanding. That is so cool. Can I learn that too? The instructor inclined his head. It seems, our first lesson has been determined, young ward. I will first teach you to call upon your natural weapon and then how to access your primary affinity. How proficient are you in the use of yoki? He shrugged. I can flare it and use it to run really fast. And to walk up trees and walls. I also learned to walk on water. But I was never really good at balancing a kunai on my fingertips. Then there are my cage bushins. I used to be really bad at bushins until I learned that form. Oh, and I can kawarimi and henge. Issei nodded with a frown. You can already change into your natural yokai form of a fox. That is fairly advanced considering your abilities. Naruto looked at him as if he was crazy. What? No. Why would I change into a fox, Kasei-sensei? Sessamaru blinked and the instructor didn't really feel superior to his student in his confusion. What did you mean by henge then? Instead of giving an answer, the blonde shouted. Warik no jutsu. Sessamaru was hard-pressed not to burrow his head into his hands. Though he really wanted to. Kasei just commented dryly. Well, he is a kitsune indeed. No doubt about that. Kurama really hated his new form. It reminded him way too much of a human, though rationally he knew that this was a demon form. Still, he didn't like walking on two legs. Four were far more comfortable. So he thought about reverting to his normal form while looking for a way out of this plane of existence. Wherever the fuck this was. Seriously, he had walked for a day now without crossing anyone's path. Sure, he had found Fate the day before, but only because she wanted him to. He had the nagging suspicion that no one else was interested. This didn't faze him. He was used to not being well liked. But that didn't mean he didn't need any help to get out of here. He didn't like this place at all. Boy you. He blinked and looked around. However, he couldn't see anyone. Shrugging, he walked on. Hey, I was talking to you. Yes you, bloody canine. Slightly offended by that pipsqueak-like voice, he deeply growled and halted again. Who the fuck are you? Show yourself. He blinked once. Then twice. Even after 3 times, he wasn't sure his eyes weren't hoaxing him. There was a fluffy green bunny with ears as large as its own body dragging behind him in the dirt. It didn't even stand as tall as his human-like chest. In terms of intimidation he was ridiculously unqualified, even if you didn't take his huge round puppy-like eyes into account. It puffed its chest proudly and Kurama had a hard time not laughing out loud. Only his dignity prevented him from that particular faux pas. Still, he couldn't help himself and sneered slightly. I am one of the mightiest kami of this realm, and you will show me respect while trespassing upon my grounds. Kurama snorted. Sure you are. Now listen here, pipsqueak. What is this place and how do I get out of here? It sucks. The green bunny squealed in indignation and stretched out a fluffy paw in a supposedly threatening manner. He looked kind of cute in all the wrong ways of the word. You harlot. Why, I never such disrespect. How dare you speak like that to the almighty Fidelity. I will teach you some manners. Suddenly there was an oppressive aura and the fox demon involuntarily gulped. How the fuck was this green fluffy bunny emanating just as much or maybe even more power than him before he was first sealed? He took a step back even though he would have never admitted to such. Something was seriously wrong with this bunny. Let's just say that this wasn't his proudest day. He was the strongest of the Biju. In his best days, he would have played with the thought of fighting all of them together to have a really challenging spar. But after having half of his chakra sealed away, then the fuck up with Naruto and the price, he really wasn't at his peak. Even so, he was still strong and proud with no shortage of experience and could probably fight off anything that was thrown his way. Or so he thought at least. But being flattened by the butt of a fluffy green bunny taught him otherwise and put a serious dent to his pride. Kurama would never again speak of it. Or look at a bunny the same way. My, you're a wreck. There was a tick in his jaw as he turned around to meet and rebuke the rude woman. Only to hold and freeze as he felt her vast aura. It smelled of death and decay. How the fuck had he not noticed her before? Ah yes, sure. Because he was in the realm of everything and anything. Apparently just about anyone he met had the potential to crush him under their heel and make it look like an accident. And while he was many things, wild, proud and easily angered among them, he wasn't stupid. So he mustered up all the courtesy he still held, gritted his teeth and gave the Lady of Death a most polite nod because she not only probably but most definitely had the potential to neutralize him. If you don't mind, well I am not at perk condition, I don't think I am. A wreck. The pale figure skeptically lifted a raven brow and looked him up and down. Oh yes, you most certainly are, she told him lightly and uncaringly. She could have talked about the weather for all her care. It is rare that I meet an incomplete soul. In fact, I usually don't. She drew her brows together. Actually, I don't think I've ever met part of a soul. He blinked. What do you mean? Half my soul is dead, isn't it? So you as the Lady of Death should have met it. For all her countenance, she looked at him as if he was crazy. He couldn't exactly fault her for it since he already suspected that he wasn't perfectly sane. But still, he took slight offense at the sheer incredulity she radiated. My, how your world must have fallen if it can't even remember the basic principles of life and death. A soul moves into the world, lives, dies and leaves the world. Then repeats the process. A soul. Not part of a soul, not even half a soul. How would you even kill part of a soul? Ridiculous. Preposterous. She shook her head at the mere thought. Slowly processing what she had said, he opened his mouth. Then closed it. Then opened it again. You mean to tell me that my other half is still alive? She wrinkled her petite nose and looked at him as if he was extraordinarily dumb. Of course, you fool. Didn't I just say so? As long as part of a soul still remains, the rest lingers. So? Theoretically, if I had a part of a soul and wanted to make it whole again, but the other half supposedly died. Her endless eyes narrowed and she raised her chin proudly. Not that she could look down on him with her tiny body and all. Still, it felt like she was doing exactly that. I am no information broker for insufferable fools who can't even think for themselves. She turned sharply to leave. Wait, how do I? But she was already gone. Shit. Bloody commie. Gives me that information and just leaves. Insufferable woman. Who does she think she is? Arg. He hated this place and all its inhabitants. But at least now he knew somewhat what to do. He had to get out of here, not that he hadn't tried already, go back to Konoha and patch his soul up. As much as he hated that place. After all, it was the last location he had been whole. And it was where half of him had supposedly died. Or not, as he knew better now. Alright. This should be remote enough to be safe from spies. Naruto looked at his big brother wide-eyed, who had relentlessly pulled him along until they had reached a remote part of the castle, which usually wasn't used if it wasn't at full capacity. As this Sessamaru already said, you cannot trust anyone, especially with vital information. Now, what was that technique you used to multiplicate yourself? The illusions were solid, incredibly detailed and absolutely indistinguishable. Pride. It was all over his little brother's face. Being able to do it obviously meant a lot to him. I know, they are awesome, right? At the academy we had to pass this test to make a bushin. But I couldn't make one and failed the exam. Then one of the teachers told me I could still pass if I did a secret and special mission. So I stole a super secret scroll from our Hokage, from our village leader. Turns out, the teacher was an imposter and wanted the scroll for himself. But he heard Iruka-sensei, so I used the technique on the scroll, the Kage Bushin, and beat him unconscious. Then Iruka-sensei said that I passed the exam because my Kage Bushin is super awesome. It is way better than normal Bushins anyway. Sessamaru raised a brow. This Sessamaru assumes normal Bushins are simple illusions without sustenance. The fox demon knitted his brows. If you mean that they can't touch things, then yeah. Like I said, my Kage Bushins are way better. They can touch things and fight. They can even make Kage Bushins themselves. This Sessamaru noticed the even distribution of yoki between them. So they can actually use it. Remarkable. How connected are you? Do you share a mind with the copies or do they have one of their own? The young heir inaudibly sighed. His little ward really needed to learn a lot. I don't know. They all act exactly like me. I mean, I don't know what they are doing when they are running around, but I know it when they dissolve. That gained him a sharp glance from golden eyes, clear wonder inside them. You mean to say that you gain all their memories as if you had been there yourself? When the blonde nodded, an actual smile formed on his lips. Do never ever tell this information to anyone. In fact, try to use this technique as seldom as possible. It will be our ultimate secret advantage. His eyes glinted and Naruto began to share his excitement. If you teach me this technique, no one will ever know whether we really are there short of attacking us. Even better, the kitsune leaned forwards, so to not miss anything, we can learn anything faster than anyone else. We could have a couple of copies study while we spar. Think about all the possibilities, little bother. That definitely got him excited. You mean, no more morning classes? Sessamaru eyes shone from within. Yes. I'm in. Come on, let's teach you, so we can spend all day tomorrow together doing whatever we want. It was a day like any other. The priests were bringing him new books to read, the villagers nearby offered a sacrifice for his benevolence, and he himself slept, ate, talked and studied at his leisure. Kami-sama. A smile lay on his lips. Nuwa was a beautiful young priestess for human standards. She also had the tendency to not listen to him whenever he gave her leave to use his name, while claiming that she was too unworthy to speak his name out loud. She was a very sweet young lady, always polite and kind. Her intelligence knew no bounds, and her mind was as quick as it was creative. She amused him greatly and taught him many things. And last but not least, she was his favorite human ever since the sage. What is it, Nuwa-san? Have you already finished the scrolls your sensei gave you? She ducked her head and smiled sheepishly. Well, I wouldn't say that exactly. Her cheeks tinged in a lovely shade of pink. I might have ignored those, she ended in a low whisper while glancing around to make sure no one heard. He snorted. That was so like her. Always eager to learn, but incredibly hard to motivate to read. She hastily waved her hands around. Never mind that. I have actually come to get you. There is a pair of petitioners waiting outside the temple for you. He nodded and jumped to his feet. It usually happened that way. Rarely were humans ever courageous enough to actually enter. So there was always a guard outside in case someone sought out his wisdom. Whatever wisdom he had to offer. He had taken the old man's words to heart and tried to learn everything there was about this world so that when the time finally came to save it, he would do it wholeheartedly, just like the sage had told him. Still, he was so young and never ventured outside the temple grounds. There was so much that he did not know yet, did not live and experience. However, he would do his best for whoever sought him out. Sometimes he would even employ his priests to help the petitioner. He looked back and saw that Nuwa was incredibly slow. So he traced back and tugged at her sleeve with his teeth. He had grown somewhat during the past couple of decades. He imagined still reaching human knee height and shuddered. At least with his back reaching most humans' waists, he didn't feel as dwarfed by anything anymore. Mostly. Come on, he grumbled at her with fabric between his teeth, which always made her laugh easily. His heart melted just a bit. Outside, the two petitioners looked like brothers close in age and kneeled readily with bowed heads on his temple steps, lower than himself of his priests. How, may I help you, young wanderers? A little startled by the soft voice, the men looked up. He knew they had expected something more deep and imposing, but he really didn't see the point in making his supplicants tremble in terror. If anything, it would make them even more nervous to speak and therefore take more of his time. Not that he overly minded. Each encounter with a new human gave him a welcome distraction and further education. A new experience. The taller of the brothers looked first at him, then over his shoulder at his favorite little priestess. But something inside him suddenly recoiled. Something wasn't right here. The man didn't look awestruck or frightened like anyone meeting him for the first time usually did. No, there was something else in his eyes, something. Pure instinct made him jump aside. He felt the air whipping apart where he had just stood and the ground beneath explode. Not believing his senses, he stared at Nuwa and the residues of fire on her fist, which had impacted the earth so hard that it shattered. But before he could overcome the fact that Nuwa's sweet kind-hearted Nuwa had just attacked him, the two men in front of him sprung into action, both of them creating huge amounts of water. Water and fire. While he was a creature of fire and wind. They obviously prepared to overwhelm him quickly to their advantage. Still trying to wrap his head around his favorite priestess's friend attacking him, betraying him, he swiftly avoided them all by a breath of air. Eyes wide, he looked around for help. Where was the guard? Or anyone else for that matter? Even if no one was around, at least the guard was honor-bound to always stay at his post. What was he to do? He had read about fighting, but hadn't actually thought he would have to defend himself anytime soon. Or ever. A foolish thought, he now realized. And now here he was being attacked by 3 humans at once. So he did something he was used to. Reason. Wait. Nuwa, why are you doing this? What are doing for that matter? What are you trying to accomplish with this madness? The woman sneered at him, no speck of the lovely girl he knew left in her eyes. Shut up, demon. We are trying to rid the world of your despicable existence. You are nothing but an abomination, luring humans into a poisoning sense of peace with false promises and hopes. Again, he had to jump out of the way, aghast. But this time, he didn't make it. She punched into his ribs and broke quite a few of them, while he crumpled to the ground with a painful grunt, burns at his side. He looked up to the human he had favored above everyone else but the sage, pure anguish in his eyes. She looked right back, her gaze as hard as steel, as she prepared another jutsu. He unconsciously trembled. But we know what you really are. Oh yes, we know that you and the other demons are seeking to dominate our world and destroy it. But we won't let you. A certain amount. He growled half indignant, half in disbelief. We do not plan any such thing. We are here because of the sage, the one that gave you the power you are currently wielding. We are his children. We protect this world. Why would we ever want to destroy it? She scoffed, not believing him for a second. Sure you are. She spat in front of his paws. Do you really think me that foolish? I will not be that easily tricked by that innocent facade you show to the priests. I have been warned after all. Now prepare to die. Their eyes never once left each other as she hurled a storm of fire directly at him. He could do nothing but stare, the reality of the situation not quite catching up with him. Suddenly he was flung aside. He looked at his savior, but froze when he saw one of the brothers that had attacked him earlier and now held a knife to his throat. The other man scowled furiously at the imposter priestess. Nuwa. We had our orders. We are to apprehend him, not kill him. I know, you want this monster to cease to exist. Believe me, I do just as much. But our master still needs him for something before we can get rid of him. Nuwa sneered at the man and started an argument while the one at his throat seemed slightly distracted by them. He knew right then that it was his only chance to survive whatever ordeal this so-called master had planned for him or even the death by his deceivingly lovely human's hand. He hastily gathered his chakra before his mouth and released it in full force. Black reddish flames engulfed his assailant. The scream shook him to his bones, but he did not halt to look at the spectacle. Instead he threw himself at the pair that had stopped arguing and looked at him in honest surprise before rushing to defend themselves. But the man was too late. An instinct he didn't realize he possessed had driven him to sink his teeth deep into the man's throat. A familiar coppery taste flooded his mouth. But instead of provoking his appetite, it made his stomach clench strangely. The second assailant went down gargling. Nuwa had frozen on the spot, hands raised and poised to form seals. He looked at her flatly, face devoid of emotion. I am not a monster. It was no more than a whisper. I thought you were my. His voice gave out. His eyes stung. She contorted her face in a combination of fury and desperation. Yes you are. You killed them. They were my brothers. And you killed them, you monster. With an anguished battle cry, she hauled a giant fireball at him. She was talking about robbing one of one's siblings. Yet, she had just tried the same. His own siblings would never forgive him if he died right here and now. So he couldn't not defend himself, he realized. A black reddish flame with answered the pure red ones of his former priestess. And totally overwhelmed them. A smell of burnt flesh grazed his sensitive nose while he looked totally petrified at the remains of someone he had trusted but had betrayed him. He had no other choice but to kill her. The taste of blood still lingered on his tongue but he couldn't have let the men take and kill him afterwards. He had to kill them. He shook. He had to kill them. He had taken lives, precious lives that his father had wanted him to preserve. But he had had no other choice. He had killed them. She had betrayed him from the beginning. And he had trusted her so easily. He swore himself he would never make that mistake again. Naruto woke with a pained feeling in his chest. The betrayal burned him up from inside out and wrenched tears out of his eyes. Sesshomaru was suddenly awake next to him and looked him into the eyes. A thought suddenly crossed his mind and pulled him out of the nightmare. Had his brother felt similarly when he had been betrayed as previously implied? The depth of hurt simply overwhelmed him. He decisively snuggled into the other boy and closed his eyes. He would never ever let him feel that. He would rather die. He felt his brother's arms enclose around him and knew everything was well. As long as he had his brother, he had nothing to fear. With a smile on his lips he fell asleep again. Naruto froze in their spar and got a kick against his stomach that sent him flying. Moaning a little, he picked himself from the ground and glared at his older brother. So you use this Sesshomaru thing to distance yourself and to seem all arty and stuff. Sesshomaru sighed inaudibly. They currently had half a dozen clones each teaching each other while the original sparred. Mainly it was him teaching Naruto. But one pair was discussing the usage of chakra in Naruto's original world in comparison to the usage of yoki here. And one was giving them an alibi by sitting on an official castle instructor's lesson. He had just felt a clone dismissing itself after Naruto's did so with a huff. They had been talking about etiquette, speech and posture at the royal court. You need to work on not freezing whenever you receive a memory. It makes you slow and the slow in a fight get hit and lose thus die. His little brother rolled his eyes. Yeah, I know. But you can't trick me. He said while pointing one finger accusingly at his Aniki. Don't change the subject. I am your brother and if this stingy is what you explained to me, you will not use it with me. You don't need to keep me at a distance. The final words were more of a whisper than actual talk. The Inu looked into his deep blue eyes and gulped a little. Oh no, were that unshed tears he saw. Silently cursing, he rushed to the blonde's side and patted him on the head. You are indeed right, Ataudo. I should not use such cheap methods on you of all people. After all, you are peerlessly unique and my closest companion. Nearly sniffling he looked up. You mean that? A characteristic HN was his answer. The smile on his face was brilliant. It shone like 1,000 suns and warmed Sesshomaru's heart until it melted. Seriously, the young fox demon had definitely too much power over him and didn't even notice. Which was a good thing, he supposed. Still, he had his pride. So he poked his little brother and said. Come, little brother. Since you so skillfully ended that class, we shall continue our studies in person. What? Oh no, please no. I can make a new clone. Come on, Aniki. We don't need to do it for real. I can give you 2 or 3 clones instead. Yes. Think about all the things they could learn. I am just one person. But the clones would be 3. Please. Amused he looked down at his brother, who was actually clinging to his side for the dear life of him, begging like there was no tomorrow. When he shook his head, it seemed like Naruto's world came crushing down. I am sorry, Ataudo, but we decided that for now, we will use no more than half a dozen clones, so to not overload our minds or exhaust ourselves too much. I will take you up on that offer once our minds have adjusted and are capable of handle more safely and we have established how many bushins we can keep up for this long. That means you get to learn etiquette from me personally. Only a pitiful moan was his answer. You never used chains before, did you? A vague and unintelligible muttering answered his dry instructor's words. Sesshomaru and Kasei sighed simultaneously and continued to stare at the calamity that was tangled up in front of them with a certain amount of incredulity. Naruto had just managed to call upon his natural weapon, chains made of pure yoki. Then he had gone all crazy and played around with them until he had ended up as a gift wrapped up perfectly and unable to move. Alright. Cut off the yoki sustaining the chains. The kitsune fell ungratefully down to the ground, face first, with a yelp. His older brother resisted to cover his face with his hands, a familiar urge by now. The frightening thing was, with each time the urge was easier to ignore. It was becoming a habit. Well, that's it for my training you in the usage of your natural weapon, young ward. I will get you an adequate instructor by tomorrow. For now, let us work on your primary affinity and your sword skills afterwards. Yeah. I want to learn that. A hyperactive ball of energy bounces towards them and looked at the instructor with big blue anticipatory eyes. Good. I need you to sit down with me and close your eyes. He continued to do just that. Focus on your breathing. How the air rushes inside and out of you. Focus on your blood. How it rushes inside you, reaching every part of your body. Focus on the energy swirling around in you. How it moves in certain paths and pulls in certain areas. Do you feel it? An hour passed until Naruto finally nodded slightly. Good. The largest pool should be at the center. I want you to take just a bit out of it and release it completely uninfluenced. You. He couldn't talk any further because a massive block of wind hit him in the face and sent him flying. which was a good thing. Because right after there was a wave of smoke and black reddish flames coming his way. He barely had enough time to put enough distance between them and dodge out of the way. That feeling was awesome, Dadabeo. Naruto grinned and opened his eyes. Only to be shocked by the devastation around him. The ground around him was charred and churned up. Panic settled in his gut. He looked around frantically. Aniki. This Sesshomaru is fine. The Inuyasha had jumped up one of the castle walls and jumped down, completely unharmed. Naruto ran to him with inhuman speed and jumped him to hug the life out of him. He vaguely remembered something about decorum or something, but he didn't care. He was simply overwhelmed with relief that his big brother was okay. The young heir ruffled his head lightly. "It is fine, Ataudo," he murmured quietly. Then he smiled at the boy in his arm and said a bit louder. "It seems like your primary affinity is wind. And your secondary affinities are illusions and fire, which are not surprising considering you are a kitsune." That certainly managed to get his attention. "I have 3 affinities." "Awesome, Dadabeo. Do you have others too, Aniki?" Sesshomaru nodded as the other boy finally let him free. "This Sesshomaru's secondary affinity is light. It is not as useful as other affinities though." Naruto blinked and looked at the Inu incredulously. "Not useful? That is not true. I mean, you can light the dark and form a whip with it. Maybe you can use it to burn or something. I mean, the sunlight burned me once. It was really painful. And I bet it even helps you with illusions. I mean, illusions are tricks of light or something, right? I think so at least. But I haven't really paid attention in class. So I might be wrong." He scrunched his nose in thought and started scratching the back of his neck. For all the surprises he had already suffered by his new brother, Sesshomaru had never felt this stupid before. Or this arrogant. In his pride he had only seen the damage poison could inflict and never even considered light to be useful. He had never heard of any powerful attacks made of light and cast it aside in favor of more power. After having prided himself for his intelligence, he could not believe he had been this stupid and short-sighted. After only a day with shadow clones, he had already realized their sheer potential. Then, why had he never thought about the potential of light? True, it was a tool of trickery and not particularly honorable, but hadn't he been taught to use any means necessary to win a fight? It wasn't even only a tool of war. It was a tool of stealth. How many times had he had problems to get away from his guards? Or wanted to spy on his father's meetings? Could he use his light affinity to let it pass him and thus make him practically invisible? Suddenly a whole new bunch of ideas for the usage of light sprung into his head. He could not believe that he had discarded his secondary affinity that easily. "Nai-san." He blinked a bit and focused on the here and now again. On his brilliant clever little brother. He smiled and ruffed his hair. "Thank you, Ataudo. You are absolutely right." The answering smile was the trademark one, the one he had come to love. "It seems both of us need to train some more." 2 similar but completely unlike brothers lounged in the garden under a clear sky and beautiful stars. When Sesshomaru had wanted the servants to bring them a pair of chairs, Naruto had laughed and pulled him with his onto the grass. The stains would probably never get out of his formerly pristine white kimono. But then again, he was pretty comfortable lying lazily on the soft grass together with his little brother, so he really didn't mind that much about his clothing. Ordering the servants to leave them alone, they started to trade stories. Naruto told him about his life at the orphanage first, then their rejection and the following life on the streets, until he managed to get his orphan allowance personally. He still had troubles to find a place to stay, since no one wanted the demon child anywhere near them. Finally he had found a small room for rent in the red light district, whose owner, living somewhere else entirely, didn't give shit who it was that lived there as long as money came in. He told his brother about the villagers' hate, which he didn't understand, and his dream of becoming Hokage so that they would finally acknowledge his existence. But he also talked about darker days, his doubts, his fears that the villagers were right, that he was a monster and didn't deserve to live. He admitted having been at the point where even he did not want to live anymore, repeatedly. He recounted his lighter years at the academy, his inadequacies, their scorn and ridicule, and his need to prove them wrong. He laughed at the pranks he got into the habit to play so that they would be forced to acknowledge his existence. He fondly remembered Iruka-sensei and his support after the exam when Naruto finally knew why everyone hated him. He cursed his new team and the D-ranked missions. He bragged about the actually A-ranked mission gone wrong. Then his voice became quieter, subdued. He told him about his happiness and then Sakura's words, his parents' deaths, about the demon inside him that broke out without control, about his fears, and finally the acceptance that the world would probably be safer, better off, without him. Sesshomaru listened, never interrupting. Just holding on to his little brother's hand and supporting him when needed. He never judged, never criticized. He was simply there for him. But when Naruto talked about killing himself right before arriving here, his heart clenched painfully. Before he even realized, he had rolled to the side and pressed the other boy to his chest. For the first time in his life he consciously hugged someone and it didn't feel enough. No matter how hard he squeezed his little brother, he was still afraid he would simply vanish. Never. Please, never try to part from this world again. Do not ever dare leave me. Even if we fight or get parted, promise me, you will stay alive. Promise me, you won't die. Naruto froze in his brother's arms. Once again he felt his heart break at the thought that someone actually wanted him. Not even only for themselves, but also to stay alive. To acknowledge his existence and deeming him worthy of life. He began to cry. Then he cautiously returned the hug and nodded. Yes. I promise. I promise, Aniki. Sesshomaru sighed in relief, but did not let go. He held on, buried his nose into blonde hair and memorized his brother's unique scent of rainy woods, clear sky, and a note that he could not identify, yet undeniably liked. They laid there without moving for what felt like hours, then the Inuyasha began to speak. My mother used to live in this castle together with my father, and I can barely remember it, I was so young, but I vaguely remember being happy. Then something happened and my mother left to never return. When they told me I had to choose where to stay, I chose to remain here. I never found out what transpired exactly, but ever since then my father began to distance himself from me. Nothing I did was good enough. He spent less and less time with me. If he could, he never chose to talk to me but my retainers, instructors or servants instead. Whenever we met, there were always other people around. I tried to be a good son, to be finally acknowledged by my father, but he never once looked at me with anything even remotely related to pride or affection or any other positive emotion. It is always wariness and careful calculation. I don't know why he keeps looking at me like that, if he even looks at me at all. So yes, I know remotely how you felt in that village. I feel it every time he looks at me. I would like to know what crimes I have committed in his eyes to warrant such a treatment, but he never answers when I ask. And believe me, I did. I finally gave up on it. I finally accepted that I will never have a real family in him. Naruto hugged him closer and gave him a peck on his cheek. You don't need such a bastard. I am your family and I will never stop being your brother. The Inu nodded into the blonde hair and sighed. I know and I am grateful. Thank you, Hataudo. He was tied to a stone with several bolts and chains holding him in place. It hurt just as much as the first day he was inside the damn woman. But today something was different. Ah, yes, the birth of her child. She had been expecting, hadn't she? And he had been feeling the second life sharing living space and energy inside Kushina with him for a while now. It seemed the day of birth was finally upon them. He felt something in his host break and fluid running down her legs. Suddenly he could breathe a little easier. He immediately understood what was happening. The seal was weakening due to the childbirth. Without any conscious thought he was fighting with renewed eagerness against his restraints. Maybe after all these years he could finally be free again. He would like to see the stars. He had already forgotten what wind felt and rain smelled like. Sure, he had been experiencing these things through his hosts, but it was entirely different to feeling a breeze caress your actual fur or feeling your paws pounding into wet earth when you run and simply enjoy the movement. His soul yearned for this kind of feelings, of freedom. He would not let anything stand in his way towards freedom. Then he felt like running against a wall face first. Growling he focused on the outside world and saw Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, standing next to his wife, hands on the seal on her pregnant stomach. Frustrated he tried again to get out, but the blonde gritted his teeth and stood his ground. Howling and growling he tried again and again, never succeeding. Then there was the wailing of a baby and he felt like crying himself. The chance for escape was gone. He already felt the seal regaining in strength. All of a sudden the idyllic picture of a family was disturbed by a commotion. Half interested, half still sulking because of his earlier failure, he turned his senses towards outside again. A one-eyed, masked black-clad figure held the baby, which somehow bore whisker marks of all strange things, hostage, and demanded his vessel. Then they were in motion and fighting and everything went up in flames. The next thing he knew, the masked figure had kidnapped his vessel and messed up the seal. Then he saw the bloody Sharingan again and he knew what would follow. He frantically drove his claws into the altar he was pinned upon and searched for a way out. There was none. He would rather be pinned down in here under constant pain than ever reliving the loss of control of all his senses and his body again. But he could not look away. The bloody eye practically overwhelmed the seal and tore him out. Then he relived his worst nightmare. The world turned into red haze and he no longer could form any thoughts. Fragments of his senses reached him inconstantly. It was the same as before. Humans screaming, fighting, fleeing, dying. The taste of copper and iron in his mouth. Things crushed under his paws. Complete destruction. And suddenly, his head was clear again and he regained full control over his body. Something must have happened to the one controlling him. He roared in the sheer happiness that he could. Then he felt a little hurt and focused on the situation at hand. He could relish his regained freedom afterwards. First he had to assess the situation. From what he understood, he had been flattening the hidden village of the Leaf, Kanahagakure, and killing its inhabitants. Again. One would think the damned Uchiha would find something else to let their frustrations out on. Whatever. The point was that he faced an entire village of scared and/or revengeful humans. Some of which could actually hurt him. And aside from any bloody Uchiha with their fucking Sharingan and the bitch Mito, who was already dead, he bore no specific hatred for any of them. Well, he guessed, he wouldn't cry over the deaths of the Yondaime and his wife for keeping him imprisoned, but then again they didn't know any better. So he reasoned that having them as casualties would be acceptable, but going after them in cold blood while facing an entire shinobi village with some knowledge of sealing was suicide. Better to get away while he still could. Maybe he could even get the Uchiha bastard that tried the Sharingan on him. If only he knew where exactly that sorry excuse of a human being was hiding himself. Then all his carefully thought through plans went up in flames as the shinobi initiated another chain of attack on him. He defended himself against it and opened his mouth to tell them that it hadn't been him that had attacked the village, that he had been controlled and couldn't care less about their miserable lives and only wanted to live in peace away from them. However, no word passed his lips because a giant bloody toad sat itself on him and drove him into the ground. He growlingly tried to get up again but was suddenly transported through a space jutsu. There was the Yondaime Hokage, his whisker-marked son in his arms and red-haired wife at his side. Yet again he opened his mouth to speak, to bloody reason with them, but before he could even utter a syllable, golden chains made out of pure chakra restricted him to the ground and wound themselves around his throat, effectively throttling him and thus preventing him from speech. Bloody Uzumaki. "I am going to draw the Kyuubi with me to my death," she then suddenly said. He was speechless. What the fuck was she thinking? Dying and trying to take him with her? He bloody well would prevent that insane plan. Again he tried to free himself, but the chains didn't budge one bit. "Ashina, there is no need for you to die with the Kyuubi. I will use the Reaper Death Seal to seal half of the Kyuubi inside me forever instead." A cold shudder ran across his spine as he listened to the couple's conversation. He didn't know what alternative would be worse. Death or being torn apart. Unconsciously he began to tremble. His whole body shook with fear. As for the other half. "I will seal it inside Naruto with the 8-sign seal. He will become a Jinchuriki. That masked man who attacked you today is a harbinger of disaster. And the one who will stop him is this child." He wanted to growl, but not a sound came out of his constricted and throttled throat. As if he needed that child to kill that bastard Sharingan user. He would do it himself if he ever got free, which he had to admit was looking rather unlikely at this point. Then the bastard of a Hokage started the hand signs for the first seal. A Shinigami formed itself behind him, ready to do as his master commanded and take his soul in return. "I am not doing this just for you. I'm doing this for Naruto." Then the Shinigami stroked the blonde first and then him. Seal. He felt himself being torn apart. It was pure agony as his very soul was torn into 2 pieces. He felt like crying, like shouting his pain out to the world to hear, but those damn chains still didn't allow him even that satisfaction. "Alright. Next is the 8-sign seal. I will seal the Kyuubi inside Naruto." And somehow the bastard, who was in the process of being devoured by a Shinigami, still had the energy to talk and walk around, the baby in his arms. He laid the brat down. Suddenly, he felt the chains loosen. It seemed Kushina's strength was diminishing. Still wailing in agony, he saw his only chance to escape. They couldn't seal him if there was no vessel. Somewhere inside he felt something break at the thought of murdering an innocent kid. But he couldn't do this again, being chained down and painfully staked for years with no end in sight but the end of his host's life. Then they would choose yet another miserable soul to seal him in, and the process would repeat itself until he went mad and wouldn't care any longer. Who knew when the next opportunity for escape would come along, if it ever would. Shutting down any remote semblance of moral he had still left, he stoked down his claws with a clear intent to kill the kid when in a flash there were 2 bodies shielding it. Inwardly sighing he felt relieved. The kid would come to no harm and the humans trying to rob him of his freedom again would die. He could not have hoped for a better outcome. As if to mock him, Bloody Namikaze Minato performed a summoning jutsu and gave the toad the key to the sealing formula. 8-sign seal. With that all his hope was lost. He felt the now familiar pull of a seal that tugged at his soul until everything went black. He knew when he woke up it would be in his newest prison. Naruto woke up with a start and more than one shocking realization. Before he could even begin to process the sheer magnitude of revelations, he started to cry hard. Why? Because the Kyuubi could not do so and he had felt everything he did. He deserved someone to cry for him and his fate. After all, nothing had been his fault. He had been the victim, always the victim. His brother embraced him and hugged him close. He cried even harder. Who did the Kyuubi have? He had been alone all the time. He remembered the other tailed beasts, his siblings, and the sage, their father. He hadn't seen them in centuries, had suffered through pain and agony, imprisonment and abuse all alone. Completely and utterly alone. With no end in sight. Naruto. Ataudo. Calm down. It was just a dream, a nightmare. That elicited a new wail, and the fox demon shook his head. No. He cried desperately, no, it wasn't a dream. I didn't understand at first, but now I do. The dreams I have, they aren't nightmares. They are memories. Memories of the Kyuubi that was sealed inside me. Sesshomaru sharply inhaled, but didn't stop caressing his back in an attempt to calm him down. What made you come to that conclusion? I saw through his eyes. I always lived these memories from his point of view. Until now, I didn't understand the situations he was in. But this memory was about the attack on Konoha on the day of my birth. He shook. I saw my parents with me in their arms. They talked about sealing the Kyuubi inside me, half of it. And they sealed half of it inside my father. And my mom was his vessel before me. There was this man that. He shuddered again and his big brother stroked his hair. SHH. Calm down. Let us get your emotions under control first. Then you can tell me everything and we will work this out together, alright, Ataudo. Naruto shakily nodded while Sesshomaru already pulled on a rope that rang a bell in his servants' quarters. When one of them promptly appeared, he was still holding the trembling mess that was his little brother. This Sesshomaru requires some calming herbal tea, a glass of warm goat milk and an additional blanket. All of which the servant swiftly supplied. Now having the other boy tugged into an extra blanket and sipping on his milk, he said. Now, tell me about your dreams, Ataudo. The first one was kind of nice at first. I was sitting together with my siblings the Kyuubis, and a human they called father. He was sending them away to live in separate temples with priests looking after them. Then the Kyuubi became really sad because he thought it was the last time he would see his father. I think this memory is the earliest so far. As far as I can tell, the memories weren't in any kind of order. In the second dream I had he was sitting all alone in an ancient temple. Everyone else had been dead for a really long time by then. Then there was this black-haired man suddenly attacking him and purple chakra to distract him. And then the man was in front of him and looked him in the eyes. But his were so strange. They were red with a black pattern inside. Then the world faded and everything was hazy and red. Some fragments still made their way through. I think the man was using the Kyuubi to attack Konoha. And then there was that retreated woman, Mito. She sealed him inside her, and he sobbed again. It was so painful. It hurt so much. And Nikki, why did they have to hurt him? It wasn't his fault. He was being controlled. It wasn't his fault. Clinging to Sesshomaru, he needed a couple of minutes to calm down. His big brother didn't say anything, well aware that Naruto needed to get this out in one go or he would never finish. Then the kitsune recounted the third memory with a hoarse voice. The next dream was in that temple again. He had a favorite priestess, so I think it happened before the last one. But she betrayed him. She worked with other men and tried to kidnap him. He defended himself. He must have been really young and small, because I remember them being as tall as myself him. And the Kyuubi later was towering over Konoha. He swallowed, he had to kill them to protect himself. They nearly succeeded and overwhelmed him. There was no other way, so he killed them. He killed them. Swallowing his argument that it had been in self-defense, he took the empty glass from his brother's shaking hands and tugged him a little closer, to which he responded by clinging harder. Freeing one hand, he reached out for a cup of steaming tea and swallowed a bit himself. Just seeing his little brother this shaken troubled him deeply. He was supposed to protect him. How, by all kami in existence, could he protect him against memories that came to him through his dreams? The night I dreamed about being sealed inside Kushina, my mother. The Inu jolted out of his contemplations and forced himself to listen attentively. She was giving birth to me, and the seal was weakening, so my dad stabilized it until I was born. He raised a hand to touch one of his marked cheeks. I was born with whisker marks. I haven't ever seen those on anyone else. And they called the baby Naruto. It could have been anyone else than me, right? For the first time since he began talking he looked up to meet Sesshomaru's eyes, who nodded in assurance. Honestly, he shared his opinion in that conclusion. But for Naruto, a nod was all he needed. Then there was this man. He had a mask with only one eye hole and a black cloak. He threatened me to get to my mom. Sesshomaru's grip became steel. Whoever that man was, he would pay for touching his little brother. But Naruto didn't notice anything and went on. My dad rescued me, but everything went up in flames. The man kidnapped my mom and broke the seal. He used the same red and black eye that the guy from my second dream used to control the Kyuubi. He called the eye Sharingan and the man in a Uchiha. He supposed it was a family name. It sounded like the eye thing was a family trait. If he ever got to Naruto's world, then he would terminate every last one of them and feed them to the dogs. Anyway, he pulled out the Kyuubi and everything went red and hazy again. The next thing I know, the Kyuubi was in a half-destroyed Konoha with a lot of dead people. A shudder. He was still trying to work out what happened and to orient himself, then the villagers continued attacking. I suppose they wanted to defend the village, but before the Kyuubi could say anything, there was this huge toad and then he was teleported away. Well, the story seemed to become somewhat screwed up, but he wasn't about to interrupt his little brother right now, only to point out the obvious. The Kyuubi was in a clearing and my mom and my dad with me in his arms were there, too. Oh. My mom could make chains out of chakra just like me. At least this thought somewhat cheered him up, despite the horrid tale. She was so cool, Dadabeo. She could hold down the Kyuubi all by herself, even though she didn't look so good at the time. He grimaced a little and a hand unconsciously fingered his throat. But she also throttled him, so he couldn't explain that the destruction wasn't his fault. First, she wanted to kill him along with herself. And then my dad started to talk about seals. Naruto scrunched up his nose in an attempt to remember the exact details, knowing that his big brother would otherwise grill him for them later. He used a Death Reaper seal on himself and ripped the Kyuubi's soul and chakra in two to seal one half inside himself. There was this Shinigami that helped him do it. But the Kyuubi thought it would cost my dad his soul. Then he wanted to seal the rest of him inside. Me. The kid soon bit his lip pensively. He talked about that man in the mask, the one that controlled the Kyuubi. He said that the child that I would be the one who would stop him using the Kyuubi's power. But the Kyuubi didn't want to be sealed again and planned to kill the man himself, so His voice faltered and he sank himself deeper into his brother. He accepted the mug of tea and sipped a little. Soothing warmth ran down his throat and loosened the constricted feeling a bit until he was able to talk again. He tried to kill me. Sessamaru froze up and his mind supplied a vivid image of a kitsune tall enough to tower over a village, attacking a human baby that was his little brother. It was not a pretty picture. It made his blood boil and run cold for revenge. So they couldn't seal me, Naruto explained, but Sessamaru was still thinking mayhem and murder, he really didn't want to hurt me. He called me an innocent kid, but he definitely didn't want to get sealed and endure years of torture again. It still didn't lessen the crime in his eyes. But mom and dad threw themselves in front of me. A sad smile laid on his little brother's lips and the Inu was floored by his ability to see something positive in anything he recounted. They protected me and got hit instead. The Kyuubi thought he would finally be free again, but before my dad died, he finished the seal. He called it the 8-sign seal and gave its key or something to a summoned toad. Afterwards the Kyuubi blacked out while being pulled inside me. For a long time, neither said a word. Both shaken and in turmoil over the tale. Then Naruto said with total conviction in his voice. I want to help him. What? Sessamaru nearly screeched. He himself hadn't even known he was capable of such. That demon tried to kill you. Why, I beg of you, are you planning to help the one that nearly killed you? Are you out of your mind? He knew he was in deep trouble when his little brother set his jaw in a mulish gesture. It wasn't his fault. He simply tried to defend himself and be free after years of being tortured, abused and imprisoned. That didn't seem like a good enough argument for child murder and he was going to point that out when Naruto softly added. He was the same as me. I had no one and was all alone. People hated and hurt me. But at least I could go wherever I wanted. He couldn't. He was in a prison for something he did not do. He was being controlled twice. He shuddered. And that was even worse than being sealed. He didn't deserve any of it. Calmingly taking a couple of breaths, Sessamaru saw the logic in that argument at least. It didn't lessen his repulsion for trying to murder his baby brother, but at least he could concede the point. Still. How would you even help him? Distraught blue eyes met his in confusion. You don't know if he is still alive. You said yourself, last you knew, he was sealed inside you. And when you came into this world, he wasn't there anymore. Rather, he fused with you and made you Daiukai. It is entirely possible that he doesn't exist anymore. Scrunching his nose at the thought, Naruto vehemently shook his head. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that he gave his life to make me a demon. It could be that whatever transported me here left him behind in Konoha. Maybe he got my real human body and this one is new. Or maybe he got out of the seal when I came here. Or something else. I refuse to believe that he died for me. Sessamaru sighed. He knew a lost cause when he saw one. And this was not a fight he would win. Very well. Maybe he is still alive. But what then? Are you going to somehow find a way back to the world that hated you and leave me behind? Some way he kept it together and his voice even, despite wanting to cry at the mere thought. Betrayal stung deeply. Naruto looked at him in pure and unprecedented shock. What? Of course not. You are my brother and I promised you to be there for you. And I never ever break my promises. I will take you with me. The Kyuubi deserves that at least someone cares about him. We will make sure that he is fine and then we'll come back here. I would never abandon you, Aniki." He seemed to think that the mere thought was an outrage. The Inu simply stared at his little brother. Then a small smile tugged at his lips and he ruffled the blonde hair, admiring the crimson highlights. "Alright. But I have one condition." Blue eyes looked up in anticipation. "We will not try to get there right away. Neither of us is strong enough yet to defend ourselves against a whole village of Yoki using ninjas if it comes down to that. We will train hard enough first and then start this ridiculous rescue mission. I will not have you die over something like that. Remember your promise, Ataudo. You will not die. And this whole idea is ludicrously dangerous." Even before he ended his little speech, his brother already nodded eagerly. "Deal. We will train, become super strong and then travel through the worlds to help the Kyuubi." Inwardly Sessamaru shook his head. He made it sound so easy, even though he knew it would be anything but. Uzumaki Kushina. Namikaze Minato. The names spun around in his head. He repeated them again and again, never wanting to forget them. His whole life he had been wondering who his parents were. If they were alive and didn't want him or simply died and couldn't keep him. His earliest childhood fantasy had been his mom or dad coming to the orphanage, explaining that they had been grievously ill and couldn't look for him before, claiming him and bringing him home with them. Then he grew up and acknowledged the fact that this fantasy wasn't particularly probable. So he accepted that they were dead like so many other parents of the other kids. There had been an awful lot of them after the Kyuubi attack. Then the whispers and bullying had begun and he had wondered whether his parents simply didn't want him because they too thought him a monster. Now he knew the truth. And he didn't know what to feel. His parents had indeed died in the Kyuubi attack. But they hadn't been victims. No, they had been shinobi, fighting for their village and sacrificing themselves to save everyone at least in their eyes. That was another point he contemplated. Their sacrifice hadn't been necessary. They could have lived if they had only let the Kyuubi speak and explain himself. And that really stung. He was no fool even though some might argue that. He knew that the Kyuubi wasn't the most kind-hearted creature. He had felt his thoughts after all. The demon didn't like nor cared for humans. But that could be because of his experiences. He wasn't evil, like everyone in Konoha thought, and he most certainly was innocent of any crime he was accused of. Given the opportunity, the Kyuubi would have simply left and sheltered himself in solitude to wait for his time to reunite with his siblings. So now he knew who his parents had been and that they had died in vain. Frustration, that was what he felt. But so much more as well. Another point he was mulling over was the fact that it had been his own father that had sealed the Kyuubi inside him, even though he had clearly thought it for the best. And people had known. He remembered it clearly. In the dream there had been the Sandaime Hokage watching from afar. The Kyuubi hadn't paid him any notice and focused at the situation at hand, but Naruto had, because he had known that man, even if he looked a bit younger. And there had been other shinobi as well, watching as his father seemingly saved their lives. People had known that he was the Yondaime Hokage's son and no one had ever told him. They had seen him sealing the Kyuubi inside his own son and no one had told him. They whispered and hated and abused him, but they never once told him the truth. Heck, he wouldn't even have known that he was a demon vessel if it hadn't been for a traitor that told him the truth. He had thought that he could trust some of them at least. But he had been wronged and lied to the whole time. Betrayal. It made him feel betrayed. Frustration and betrayal. And that was another point to think about. People had known that the demon was sealed inside him, but not him. That Naruto was his own person and merely a prison for the Kyuubi. But the villagers had never really cared about that. Instead, they had chosen to close their eyes and simply crucify him anyhow for something that wasn't his fault. And even if he really was a demon, it still gave them no right to treat him like that. He was innocent, had never committed any crime. And demons were not evil. They were like humans, some good, some bad. He knew that now. After all he had shared the Kyuubi's thoughts and feelings. And then there was his Aniki and the rest of the castle. No two demons were the same, just like no two humans were. And that the villagers willingly closed their eyes and only saw what they wanted infuriated him. The sheer arrogance and ignorance of the act. The people of Konoha had chosen not to see the truth. Anger. He felt frustration, betrayal and anger. He knew it was unhealthy to harbor a grudge and it was completely unlike him. But right now, he couldn't do anything else. Frustration, betrayal and anger raged inside him and easily overshadowed the revelation about his parents and that he himself hadn't killed them. He couldn't care less about that at the moment. He was frustrated about the world, betrayed by even the few people he had trusted and angry at everyone in Konoha. Sure, there were probably as many good people as there were bad people in the Hidden Leaf, but none of its inhabitants could claim that they had treated him right. He was young, innocent and an orphan and didn't deserve anything he had suffered. None of them had done right by him. Not even one. And for that he couldn't forgive them. Maybe in time the pain would fade, but as of right now he saw nothing even deserving of his presence there. Nor of the Kyubis. As soon as he found him, he would take him back here to live with him and his brother. His brother. The Kyubi had 8 siblings. 8 siblings that had been sent to 8 different temples over hundreds of years ago. Were they still there? Or had they suffered similar fates like the Kyubi? It had seemed like the sealing of demons had become common practice by the time of his birth. They even had a name for the demon vessels, Jinchuriki. That meant there were other demons trapped inside humans and suffering like the Kyubi. And also other humans that might have been treated like he had been for being a demon container. Maybe there were even other kids currently carrying a demon inside and being scorned by their village just like him. Naruto swore to make out the truth and help any demon and if applicable their respective Jinchuriki. He would find each of them and check if they were happy and if not, which he highly suspected given his experiences with human nature so far, to take them away from there to live here amongst their own kind. And he would let nothing stay in his way. It was a promise. And he never ever broke a promise. Pure determination led him to take off his hit I-8. For a moment he stared at the symbol of the hidden leaf. For years there had been nothing he had wanted more than to be a shinobi, prove himself to the village and become Hokage. Now that dream felt hollow. His hand found the slit at the side of his kimono where he had tied his weapon pouch to his leg and drew a kunai. He had a new dream and it didn't include Konohagakure. His hand never faltered. His aim was precise. He looked at the metal plate. A deep scratch crossed the symbol of the leaf and for the first time in his life, Naruto felt truly free. As soon as he saw his new instructor, he yelped and tried to hide himself behind his older brother. But it was no use. The demon in every sense of the word had already spotted him and squealed in delight. Naru-chan. His traitor of a brother inconspicuously stepped aside and sacrificed his little brother in order to get away from the mad woman. So Naruto suffered the fate of being squeezed to death by an overly enthusiastic spider yokai. Loudly protesting, he tried to divest her rather ample bosom of his face, but had only mediocre success. At least he was able to breathe again. Somewhat. Gin-san. Let me go. But Naru-chan, I haven't seen you in so long. Her death grip tightened and he could only wheeze. Gin-san, kindly unhand this Sessamaru's little brother and the ward of the West so he may start his lessons. Furthermore, it is unbecoming to conduct oneself as such in the presence of one's betters. She pouted but finally let him go and curtsied gracefully while dipping her head low. As you wish, Sessamaru-sama. I meant no offense. None was taken, honorable seamstress. This Sessamaru merely worried about his little brother's reputation. Naruto didn't know whether he wanted to kiss him for rescuing him or hit him for taking so long and making fun of him. So he settled for a sulky huff. What are you doing here anyway? The woman who seemed to want to make herself the bane of his existence sweetly smiled down at him. He never hated his height more. You know, I am the most sought-after seamstress in the castle and I am sacrificing my highly valuable time to come here and teach you. So you better appreciate it, Naru-chan. She glanced to his brother who had lifted an eyebrow and gave her a look. She barely refrained herself from rolling her eyes. Fine. Naruto-sama. But make no mistake. As soon as you are back in my store, I will get my satisfaction. Then her eyes glided up and down his body. He felt strangely exposed under her gaze, like prey waiting to be torn apart by a predator. My, if I may say so, you are looking really good in your new clothes, young ward. They bring out those pretty eyes of yours and make your beautiful hair shine. It is as if the sun herself deigned to kiss your body. 1,000 poets couldn't. Gin-san. Kasei's voice had a warning and sharp edge to it. Do remember that you are here as an instructor, not a seamstress, and certainly not a light lady. Please do conduct yourself as expected from a noble lady in the presence of her lords, or I will be obliged to find someone better suited to the task. While his new instructor was assuring that no measures would be necessary, Naruto was trying to figure out what Kasei was meaning by a light lady. Jin certainly looked petite enough to have a light weight, but something in the back of his mind was telling him that Sessamaru's instructor had not meant it in that sense. But before he was finished trying to unravel the mystery, both instructors had come to an agreement and pulled their lords into 2 different corners of the training field. Well, I am here to help you with your yoki chains. Kasei is rather gifted in the usage of swords, but he knows nothing about chains or in my case threads. He blinked in surprise as she called forth a couple of silvery, silky threads. This is my natural weapon and you will see that it has a lot in common with chains, though the latter will always be heavier and sturdier, which is good for an offensive and a lesser probability that they will be cut by your enemies, but they are also less subtle. Still, I heard that you prefer a rather acrobatic and versatile fighting style, and treating your chains like I do my threads will greatly contribute to its effectiveness. I mean, sure you can treat them as a mainly offensive weapon like Sessamaru-sama does with his whip, but where would be the fun in that? Using them to create yourself an advantageous environment is so much better. Watch. But that she suddenly threw her silky threads in every direction, creating some kind of net in a vague sense of the word, and jumped up. Then she continued to use them as an additional kind of floor, jumping to and fro, always changing direction. After a while of doing that and proving her own physical abilities, she upped the game by letting threads appear and disappear as she saw fit, never missing a step or grip. When she was satisfied, showing him that awe-inspiring spectacle, she jumped even higher and towards a place where there were no threads she could possibly use. He thought about calling for medical help in advance, but she surprised him yet again by calling forth a thread, which she threw against a castle wall and stuck, using it to change her direction mid-flight, sliding down another thread and gracefully landing in front of him. For a moment Naruto simply stared in awe. Then he threw his fists into the air and laughed. "That was so awesome, Dadabeo. I want to learn that. Please show me, please." Obviously feeling flattered she smiled coyly at him. "Of course, Naruto-sama. It would be an honor. This is only a fraction of what you will learn. Threads and chains have so many more applications than you could probably imagine right now, young ward. They can distract or capture your opponent, be an obstacle, limit and expand reach and so much more. I will teach you to do all that and more. I will teach so that they don't simply feel like a weapon, but an extension of yourself." That evening the two brothers were dining together in their personal dining room. The issue of food was weighing heavily on the younger's mind. He bemoaned the loss of available ramen, but even he had to admit that the palace chefs were doing a fine job consoling his stomach. Still, it was strange that he didn't mind eating raw meat any longer. He continued to like cooked meat but had discovered that he didn't prefer one way or the other. On the one hand cooked meat had a nice smoky flavor, on the other hand raw meat still held tasty blood. He wouldn't complain either way and ate whichever was on the meal of the day. Nonetheless, he wouldn't deny that he would do anything probably short of killing to get a nice cup of ramen. Itado. He looked up from his plate that contained blood-soaked vegetables and raw meat, which he suspected was of yakai origin. He idly wondered if he should be concerned that he was technically eating his own kind. Then again, it did taste good and seemed to be rather common here. "Your hit I ate is scratched." Feeling a little sad at the loss of a dream, but also determined and excited about his new one, he nodded. "Yeah, don't worry. I did that myself. It is a sign that even though I have been a Konoha shinobi, I have cut all tied with my village. They treated me bad, but had no right to do that. The Kyuubi's memories have shown me that. They knew about my parents, they were their heroes. And about the demon inside me, but no one ever told me anything. They hated me and hurt me, even though I'd done nothing wrong. They are so blind and stupid. They don't even understand that demons aren't evil. I mean, there were 9 temples with Biju living in them for centuries, and humans that talked with them. How could they forget that? How could they believe that demons are simple beasts and torture and imprison them? They knew better once and chose to ignore that. So, yeah. I have nothing left in Konoha. Even the people that I thought were precious to me have lied and betrayed me. I am done with the village. It isn't my home anymore. My home is with you, Aniki, and nowhere else." Sessamaru smiled a little, but it did not reach his eyes. "I am sorry you had to live through that. I thank all kami for whatever sent you to me that day." That elicited an honest grin from the kitsune. "Yeah, me too, Dadabeo. But we have to get super strong super fast. The Kyuubi had 8 siblings and I think they were sealed into humans, too. They must be in other villages because no one else in Konoha was treated like I was. But I believe the other humans with demons inside them are suffering, just like I was. I want to help them. How long do you think will it take us?" The Inu lifted a shoulder. "I do not know. A couple of years at best, a couple of decades probably, well over a century at worst. A Daiukai is considered an adult when they reach their 300th year. After that one ages rather slowly until they reach their prime, upon which our bodies will go into stasis. The more years pass, the slower one ages." That earned him a look of pure shock. "What? Over 100 years? No. That is too long. Who knows how many humans vessels die in misery until we're there. I mean, the demons will probably still be there, but they would have to suffer for so long." His big brother sighed a little. "I know. But consider that we are still young. We do not yet have the power to achieve the goal you have set for us, especially if it is going to be the 2 of us against multiple ninja villages, whole counties and no allies in reach." Seeing the sun-kissed boy in front of him pouting and deeply depressed, he added. "Though to cut some of the time needed to prepare short, I suppose I can use our evenings to research dimensional travel in the library while you catch up on your studies." Kami knew the boy needed that time. Before the blonde-haired demon could answer, there was a knock on the door. "Enter." Patsuo carefully entered. After claiming Naruto as his brother, Sesshomaru had made it perfectly clear that he didn't care for any breach of privacy when they were together. His Inuminder deeply bowed. "My lord. Your honorable father sends word that a messenger from the Dragon Clan has arrived. Ryakatsuse-sama will arrive in 3 weeks' time to renegotiate the peace treaties. He will stay until at least the solstice. Thus, Toga-sama has invited all great clan leaders to the festivities as a sign of further lasting peace and friendship. He implores you to prepare yourself and Naruto-sama so that there be no disturbances." The young heir nodded and dismissed him with a leave of his hand. But Hatsuo did not leave right away. Instead he hesitated and bowed anew. "Young lord, Toga-sama also wishes you to know that there have been several incidences in his chambers in the past few days." Sesshomaru waited silently for the servant to continue without even twitching. Naturo though suddenly bit his lip and did his best to look like an innocent child that he most certainly was not. The minder appeared to be slightly uncomfortable, so the Inu raised a single brow. Hatsuo coughed a little and added. The lord's chamber was flooded. His bed was soaked in some kind of itching powder solution. The walls were painted with unspeakable things. And my lord's gowns were dyed orange. He wishes to know whether you have knowledge of the cause. The honorable heir to the west did not show any emotion at the news. Indeed. How unfortunate for the lord. One would think all his guards and attendants would know to such things in advance and prevent them from occurring in the first place. His minder's lips quivered a little and his gaze quickly jumped to the slightly shivering frame of the young kitsune who did his best not to utter anything and remained seemingly inconspicuous. Sesshomaru made a mental note to himself to work on his little brother's acting. It was kind of a dead giveaway. Indeed. Pardon my intrusion, my lords. The Inu nodded and dismissed him anew. This time, the servant duly left. Then he stared at his younger brother, who looked at him slightly shaking, then burst out laughing. The heir allowed him the reprieve and himself a small smile. Then his smile turned foxy. "Alright, Ataudo. It seems we will have a rather tight schedule if we want to make you presentable within 3 weeks and socially and politically astute within the month or two. I fear we will have to employ more clones and sacrifice our evening leisure time as well in order to avoid you inciting a clan war." Naruto suddenly stopped laughing. "What did you dream about tonight? It did not seem unpleasant and you have been deeply in thought ever since waking up." Naruto flushed. It had become somewhat of a ritual between them. Every night the kitsune would crawl into his brother's bed since they ended up sleeping together because of the dreams anyway. And every morning if the memory was not too traumatizing and didn't need to be taken care of right away, they would discuss it at breakfast. So far he had witnessed the seal transfer between Mito and his mom, Kushina, who he found out were distantly related, and a couple of other painful or depressing memories, like completely lonely nights bordering to thoughts of suicide, to which he wasn't a stranger, or a couple of attacks at his person, again to which he could relate. But this night, it had been something completely different and far more disturbing. And again, the Kyuubi had shared his opinion and reactions just like in all the other dreams. "What is it, Ataudo? You can tell me anything." His eyes widened in slight panic. "I don't need to tell you how it felt to be inside my distantly related great aunt or something while she had sex with her husband." He blurted out, then clapped his hands over his mouth, completely and utterly mortified. Sesshomaru chalked on a cup of tea and needed a couple of moments to find his composure again. All the while Naruto tried to imitate a tomato if the color of his face was any indication. "Farewell. I mean," the Inu Daikai began, then deeply inhaled and tried again, "it seems, we must talk about certain things. Has anyone ever explained such things with you?" Naruto went even redder and shook his head, while his big brother favored a slight rose tinge in his cheeks. "We are not expected to experience our first stirring for a couple of years yet, but all young yakai are told before, just in case one matures earlier than expected. I will share what I know of stirrings, courting and mating." Neither of them seemed particularly comfortable with the subject. Their afternoon training sessions were split into 4 parts. First, they would increase their stamina and speed together. Following, they would improve their usage of their respective primary weapon with their personal instructors. Then they would train to better control their yoki and to access their primary affinity, during which Sesshomaru also worked on his light affinity for the first time in his life. Afterwards it was time to train with physical weapons in hand-to-hand, claw-to-claw combat. While Sesshomaru mainly focused on refining his katana technique and second on wielding a wakizashi and a naginata, Naruto continued to better his aim with shuriken and senbon. He also discovered the usage of ninja wire and sai while testing the weapons in the armory in hopes to find a fitting one. He was further encouraged to learn how to wield hand-fitting war fans. Not only were they small enough to fit into any kimono and could be carried around even when he had to disarm in a political setting, they also suited his wild fighting style and could later be used to control his yoki affinities, especially his wind one. He had a little problem with getting used to them, but he was still miles better with them than with a sword. Kasei could only cringe when thinking about how a katana in the young kitsune's hands made him a linear thoughtlessly wielding beast. His big brother and Kasei had unanimously decided to never give him a weapon he could use with both hands again. It tended to make him dumb. All the while, a couple of Kage Bushins continued Naruto's education. During one of those training sessions, a messenger interrupted them by informing them that Ryakatsuse, the Lord of the South, had arrived and was just freshens up. Sesshomaru looked at his little brother earnestly while the clones dismissed themselves. This is it. You better recall our lessons, Ataudo. The West is strong, but we have had enough war in the past century. We cannot afford another. And remember, you are the ward of the West. What you do matters. Naruto, for once completely sober himself, nodded gravely. He understood perfectly what was on the line. And be it the village or his brother's home, he had come to understand responsibility somewhat. He had seen what happened in Wave Country when things got out of control. Had seen Sasuke fall. And there was no way he would let something similar happen to his big brother. The two of them bathed and properly dressed into suitable attire. Naruto had learned how to put on a kimono by now, but the Inu checked him over anyway. This was important after all. Not only was it Naruto's first formal outing, but the negotiations with the Dragon Clan was as strained as never before. Just a couple of weeks ago, there had been a minor skirmish on the land between their borders. It had yielded losses on both sides. Like they had practiced before, they strode gracefully to the parley chambers. On the threshold, Sesshomaru gave up katana and wakizashi to a servant, while Naruto did the same with Tusai and his weapon pouch. Not that he was particularly proficient with the former, but Sesshomaru had rammed the importance of proper bladed weapons suited to one's station into him. Just giving up his weapon pouch and not wearing anything else would suggest that he was an assassin and incapable of defending himself in an earnest fight of honor. And that would apparently be political suicide. So they shamed the heck out of the situation and hoped they bought it. Bowing deeply first to their father and then to their guest, they took their place on the cushions to Toga's right. Apparently they had shared some polite banter before their arrival. Ryakatsuse's human form was a fright in itself. He had wild shaggy black hair that reached as long as any proper lord's to his waist. The minimum length for those of station. No more, no less. That in itself was a statement. He was a hulk of a man with arms as large as a men's torso. His face was all ridges and edges. Not a single soft line. Blue lips and blue birth markings that reached up and down in pairs from the chin and forehead respectively. Adding crimson eyes and more than protruding upper canines, he was a sight to behold. And feared. The dragon grinned unpleasantly as he looked the two boys up and down. So good for you to join us, Sesshomaru-san. It has been some time. Last this Ryakatsuse remembers, you reached no higher than his knees. That was not exactly a lie, but an exaggeration. Sesshomaru was pretty sure that he had been taller than that, but admittedly not by much. Not that he reached anywhere near Ryakatsuse's or even his father's height yet. He was 150. He had over a century left to grow. There was no need to emphasize his lack of height unless to provoke him. So he did the prudent thing and retorted flatly. Indeed. Times seem to change so fast and vastly. It is a wonder you haven't changed just as much, Ryakatsuse-sama. Do tell, what is your secret? The grin the dragon gave him could have chilled a dead body. It was all teeth and no lips involved. As sharp a tongue as ever, young lord. Careful, you do not want to hurt yourself in front of audience. His predatory gaze wandered to the Inu's left, where Naruto sat completely stiff. This Ryakatsuse sees, you have acquired a new pet. Was the last one not to your satisfaction? Sesshomaru had no problem keeping his face completely emotionless, even if Naturo went a little red due to repressed anger. He seemed to have learned enough to follow at least some of the many implications in that single statement. But he kept silent as practiced. Ah and are completely satisfactory. There is no more furious mount in a fight. This Sesshomaru thanks you for presenting them. But this Sesshomaru must correct you as he is sure you have made a mistake in ignorance and meant no offense. This is this Sesshomaru's little brother, Naruto, ward to the west. Everything in the dragon's face dripped of insincerity. From the humored red eyes over the toothy grin to the twitch in his nose. Is that so? He turned to the kitsune and bowed his head in a minuscule motion. You have this Ryakatsuse's sincerest apology, young ward. No offense was meant. There simply was a little confusion on the matter as to why such a creature as yourself finds itself on this esteemed young lord's side. This Ryakatsuse is sure, you understand, do you not? Well, after this direct question there was no way Sesshomaru could continue to shield him any longer without making him out to be weak. He just hoped his little brother was prepared enough for this situation. This Naruto accepts your apology, Ryakatsuse-sama. And it was plain as day, he was not used to the royal pattern of speech. It was nothing specific that gave him away. The tone was a little off. The rhythm didn't exactly match. The smoothness felt a little rough. It was a lot of little things, but by the deepening predatory grin, Sessamaru could tell, the dragon had noticed it like a shark notices a single droplet of blood in the ocean. Still, his little brother braved on. Though this Naruto does not understand your confusion, Raikatsusei-sama. Is it not the natural way of things for the lesser beings to crave the stronger one's attention? And is it not the natural way of things for the strongest clan to appreciate extraordinary beings and give them a rightful place at its side? Sessamaru sighed silently in relief. It was an accepted truth that the Kitsune clan was one of the lesser clans in terms of strength, if not numbers. Even after all these weeks, Sessamaru could not believe that Naruto was as strong as he was. And it would be something no one would expect when they tested him, as they inevitably would in due time. He really looked forward to when this time would come. For now though, they had to hang on to the lines learned by heart for each possible situation. Raikatsusei lifted a single, ragged eyebrow. This Raikatsusei sees, the kid has claws. Though it would be a dark day indeed if your clan needed a kid's claws to defend itself. This insult definitely aimed at his father. But Toga had not been the Lord of the West for so long in vain. He immaculately responded in kind. His gaze met Sessamaru's once and his son read the approval inside them. His stomach fluttered in happiness. They had done good. That evening Naruto plopped onto Sessamaru's bed with a groan. I'm never gonna go to a social or political thingy again. Amused Sessamaru primly sat down next to the slouching mound that was his brother and petted him on the messy blonde head. You did well, Ataudo. Since we are too young to actually be part of the treaties, we are excused of any formal setting until the arrival of the other clan heads. They will be arriving with their respective heirs, so we cannot avoid them. It will be expected of us to receive and entertain them. The kid soon groaned again and pulled a pillow over his head. So more weeks of learning. His voice was strongly muffled through the fabric, but even if Sessamaru hadn't understood, he already knew what his brother was going to say. So he did the reasonable thing. Well, when the solstice is over with no major incident, we will be free to do as we please again. I would like to show you the art of hunting and maybe we could visit some natural hot springs. I know a place where we would be free to train your shinobi arts as we like. Bribing. It worked every time. That much Sessamaru had learned so far. Naruto's eyes lit up and the grin on that sun-kissed face warmed him up inside. It was good not to be alone anymore. Aniki. Sessamaru looked up from a scroll and to his brother, who had been memorizing the different clans, their heads, heirs, allies, enemies, trades, treaties and holdings. Do you think we will really have peace? Raikatsusei looked like he would like going to war better. The Inu sighed a little and put the scroll down. I do not know. I certainly hope for peace. Our forces are evenly matched. Our allies likewise. While the Dragon clan is allied with the East, we have a long-standing friendship with the Wolves of the North. So outside forces are equals. And while we only have one minor great clan as our direct subjects, the Panthers make that up by matching the force of both the dragons Bakeneko and Tanuki. The small clans in both territories are similar in numbers. And the North and the East are matched as well. So if there really was a war breaking out, what do you think would happen, Ataudo? For a while, Naruto actually thought about the answer. Over a month of having quite a couple of shadow clones taught about everything and anything had made him a little more thoughtful and squished his recklessness just a bit. It wasn't like he had become a great strategic mastermind or anything, but had learned to pause and think before giving an answer. Even if his instinct was to give one right away. But after getting the advice to try to imagine scenarios he had greatly improved. So he did just that. And blanched. It would be a bloodbath, he finally whispered. If both sides are both equally strong, a lot of people would die. And a lot of yokai are just as stubborn as shinobi. They wouldn't stop. Bravely nodding, Sessamaru petted his little brother's head. Indeed. Neither would back down until their foes lay dead in front of their feet. Especially if there were heavy losses, which would definitely happen. They would not want for their comrades and brothers to have died in vain. And since two of the greatest clans are leading the war, the other two would be honor-bound to assist their respective allies. And with them come all the other lesser great clans and smaller clans. This looming war could wipe out the entire yokai population. The only ones not involved in this war would be the neutral clans under the guidance of the mirrors, the kappa and the trees. That made Naruto's nose scrunch because a thought just occurred to him. So why don't we ally with those three? I mean, we would be more and stronger than the dragons then. So we would have nothing to fear anymore. Ruefully, Sessamaru lifted the right corner of his mouth. If only that would be so easy. No one could ever find the Mirror clan. The Kappa are spread throughout the world and couldn't possibly choose a side and peril some of their own. And the tree yokai have similar problems. But even if they were united, they are led by the oldest yokai alive and are set in their ways. If any party could convince a neutral great clan to join them, they would have by now. Naruto sighed deeply. I really don't understand why we can't all just get along. I mean, we are all yokai. We aren't all that different. Doesn't that count for something? Ah, but we are, little brother. And yet, we are not. The kid soon looked utterly confused, so he further explained. Each clan and yokai race has their own instincts and traditions. For example, we Inu are proud and strong. Nothing matters more than the pack and its pride. We are a yokai clan of unity and rise and fall with the strength the pack provides. That is why the Alpha, our lord, is not just the ruler of our people, but its protector. He represents the strength of the pack and uses his own strength to keep the pack whole and safe, as you well know. Now, what did you learn about Dragon Yokai? Naruto scrunched his nose again and concentrated on recalling his lessons. They are resolve and loyalty. They follow a single leader not because of family, but because they believe in him and his resolve. And the leader needs their collective loyalty to further pursue their resolve. Indeed. And tell me, Ataudo, what about bird and wolf yokai? The bird yokai live with pride and resolve. They don't believe in a person, but a cause. They think that all is acceptable in honor of their beliefs. So they gather to make them come true and have the most capable of them lead them to their cause. And the wolf yokai are loyalty and strength. They follow their alpha because he provides for the pack and keeps them safe. In turn they give him the strength to keep doing that. It's like with Inu, but the other way around. This is correct as well. Now tell me the difference between them and tell me also what it is they all have in common. That kept him preoccupied for a couple of minutes. Sesshomaru didn't move and regarded him closely. One could nearly see the wheels turning inside the blonde's head. And finally, like a cloud in front of the sun drifting away, his face lit up. All clans hold together and follow one person. But each clan does it for different reasons. He looked so proud of himself, Sesshomaru couldn't resist smiling a little, pride welling in his chest as well. Indeed. A clan's pride or loyalty is the measure of its strength and resolve. We are all the same, but yet different in unique ways. It is the reason the four great clans of the north, east, south and west have been ruling the lands for so long. He smirked a little as he looked at his deeply in thought brother. Now don't believe I have forgotten that you still haven't finished your task. We have little time left for your studies. Better use it while you still can. Remember, the future of yokai kind could be depending on them. And the first delegations are due to arrive soon. Milady, another procession is in sight to the north. Himi looked up from her book as she heard the voice of her attendant and parted the palanquin's silky drapes a little. As she caught sight of the other procession's banner, she smiled serenely. Well, it would be shameful and offensive not to greet them, wouldn't it not? Indeed, Milady. We shall redirect our course and convene with the other clan at sunset to spend the night, if it pleases you, Milady. Himi simply continued smiling. The game was on. Strength of the pack, indeed. What if Naruto becomes a sage in Inuyasha? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.